right. Call the meeting to order. I'd like to call the December 11th, 2018 Planning Board meeting to order. At this time, I'd ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it's the duty of every planning board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any planning board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the planning board today? All right. We do have a quorum with 5 members present. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? I know we talked about it, but I don't think we're going to be changing it. We don't need to do that. All right.
The only change I might recommend would be the announcements.
Okay, yeah, so the one modification I want to make to the agenda is the announcements for the presentations. With that change, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve as amended.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so passed.
And you also have to approve the minutes.
Yep.
It's not on here, though.
And are there any changes to the October 9th, 2018 minutes?
Motion to approve, sir.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. All right, before we do the old business. There's a lot of folks speaking. All right, my name is Fred Whiteman. I'm the chairman of the planning board. According to page 1, section 2 of the Currituck County Planning Board rules of procedures, a board member can serve 2 consecutive terms. Planning board members may also continue to serve after their term has expired until their successors have been appointed by the Board of Commissioners. I'd like to take a moment to formally recognize 2 of our board members who have reached the end of their 2 consecutive terms. Jane and Stephen, if you guys could step out front, please. Right. Whereas Ms. Jane Overstreet has faithfully served as a member of the Currituck County Planning Board from December 2013 through December 2018, and whereas Ms. Overstreet has devoted numerous hours and energies to serve in this capacity, and whereas Ms. Overstreet has served as an integral part of shaping the future of Currituck County, and whereas Ms. Overstreet always acted in the best interests of the citizens of Currituck County as a member of the Planning Board, and showed steadfast leadership and responsibility judgment during her tenure. And whereas the citizens of Currituck County will enjoy a higher quality of life as a result of Ms. Overstreet's dedication. Now therefore be resolved by the County of Currituck Planning Board members that they would like to extend their sincere appreciation and thanks to Ms. Overstreet for her dedication in service to Currituck County while a member of the Planning Board.
Thank you.
Stephen Craddock. Whereas Mr. Stephen Craddock has faithfully served as a member of the Currituck County Planning Board from January 2013 to December 2018, the Planning Board members would like to extend their sincere appreciation and thanks to Mr. Craddock for his dedication and service to Currituck County while as a member of the Planning Board.
Mr. Whiteman, while you're up here, I'll be glad to present you with the report. time, you'll serve as Planning Board Vice Chairman for year 2017 and as the Planning Board Chairman for year 2018. And we appreciate your service to us and the county. We also have one other item for you, sir. On behalf of all of the staff, on behalf of all the planning board members who are here and those past that you have served with, we'd like to offer you this commemorative gavel plaque as a sign of respect and appreciation of the job that you've done as vice chairman and chairman. Thank you very much.
Don't hit anybody.
Try not to.
All right, back to business. Yeah, old business. Old business, we have PB 1714 solar text amendment. We don't have anybody here to speak on behalf of or in opposition to the solar text amendment, do we? To speak? Okay, can you step up and state your name and address?
Several people signed up to speak.
For solar?
Yes, sir.
Yep, there's two. There's three. All right, Mr. O'Neill, what we'll do is we're going to wait then. I'll go ahead and let the staff present, and then I'll call you guys up as needed. Yep. Who's presenting this one?
I'll be doing that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a text amendment that the board heard back in your October meeting, and it was continued for some more information, and also the planning board directed staff to make some changes or additions to the text amendment. And what I will do is, since you've already heard this, I'm going to go over the changes that we've made based on your direction. And then I understand the chairman has some additional changes for the board to consider as well, and we'll go through those. The first direction was that, actually, I think I've slide. The original text amendment directed by the Board of Commissioners removed wind energy facilities as part of the solar ordinance. It was a two-pronged text amendment, but it removed wind energy facilities as an allowable use in the county. And the planning board directed staff to put leave the use in the department, in the UDO, as an allowable use, because the Department of Defense is a technical review committee member. They review all of our cases. So the Department of Defense would weigh in if the concern of interference with the radar for the Northwest Naval Annex was a valid concern. Then they would weigh in with their comment at technical review committee. There was originally only allowed 2 abutting properties to join together to allow a solar project. And the planning board is recommending that an unlimited number of properties should be allowed to function as one project. The Board of Commissioners had suggested or had directed a maximum project size that would be either 250 acres or half of the acreage of the property as it existed on the adoption date, whichever is bigger. And basically, if your property was 1,000 acres, you could have a 500-acre site. The planning board had asked that the size limit be removed. The Board of Commissioners had added in the setback to that interior shared property line. Planning Board is recommending that interior setback not be required so it can function as one project. We had direction to limit the hours of operation from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and also some prohibitions of pile driving within 1,500 feet of a public school or licensed daycare when school is in session. Planning Board is recommending that the noise ordinance, nuisance ordinance that's part of our code of ordinance, that govern these things instead of making a separate rule for them, and also that the facilities be allowed to operate on a Saturday. The Planning Board asked for additional information regarding monitoring wells for drinking water. That was provided to the Planning Board from First Solar, and I believe some of the other solar companies that were in attendance at the meeting that night. And that's what we picked up from the last Planning Board meeting, and now I will turn it over to the chairman to discuss some additional changes that are suggested that the board will need to vote on.
All right. Let me, do you guys have any discussion before we call up those that want to speak? Okay. Do you have any additional discussion before we call up the folks that want to speak? Okay. So I have, let's see, Jimmy Farabee, Joe Etheridge, Paul O'Neill. Is there anyone else signed up to that wants to sign up to speak for the solar? All right, let's go ahead and start with Mr. Farabee. If you could state your name and address.
James Farabee, Shaw Run, Montana, Post Office Box 110. This land consists of some of the land.
Mr. Farabee, can you go to the mic, please? I'm sorry.
This land consists of the land that my sister and myself own. The conditions of farming today, it's hard to make a living on marginal land, and this is marginal land, which you're probably familiar with. And we would like to put this in solar. We've been trying to get it done for 2 years, and the commissioners have said we can't do what we want to do with our land. I appreciate what she said tonight. Looked like those ordinances are within standards of what should be done. This will not put a burden on the county, like development, other projects. I'm not against development, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying it's not requiring anything of the fire department, police department, schools, or nothing, which y'all know. And I wish y'all consider getting rid of this ban and helping us any way you can.
Yes, sir.
And we'd be glad to help y'all if you got any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Farabee? Thank you, Mr. Farabee.
Thank you.
Sheree, do you want to do the time for the Mr. Etheridge?
Joe Etheridge, 882 Shawboro Road, Shawboro. I agree with what Mr. Farabee said. The last thing that was put up about inquiring of First Solar or other solars, are we going to hear any more debate on that or anything?
We do have some suggestions to modify the existing or the proposed text amendment. You'll hear those in just a little bit.
Okay. Like Mr. Farabee said, I appreciate the level-headedness that seems to have come over this, and we need, just to be able to do with what should be able to do legally. I mean, that's all we're looking for. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. And Mr. O'Neill?
Mr. Chairman, Planning Board members, my name's Paul O'Neill. I live 893 Water Lily Road. First of all, I want to tell you, they give out better plaques than when I was on the Board of Commissioners now, so we've got an upgrade. Congratulations. I'm here speaking tonight in favor of the proposed solar amendment. I was on the Board of Commissioners when all 3 solar programs or projects that are in Currituck County came before the board. I voted in favor of the one in Moyock, 1,800s of solar panels. Sure does help educate some children and provide for the tax base in Currituck County. I was on the board and voted for the one in Shawboro. Again, it requires no services. You'll never have law enforcement out there. And it's just pure profit to the county for the school systems, for other things. And I was also on the board when the one at the Eagle Creek Golf Course came forward, and I voted against that one because I didn't think it was an appropriate location. So I've been on both sides of the solar projects. I will say that, I'm from an older generation, and I'm a fossil fuels guy. I like gasoline and diesel and everything, but I do have young children that are growing up. And the next generation is working towards some renewable energies. And they're going to figure it out. And I say far be it from us to tell the next generation what they can and can't do. We have a lot of people that own land in this property, have owned it for generations. And they either build houses or they can do some other things with it. Well, nobody wants any more houses in Currituck County. So if a landowner can sell a small portion or lease a small portion of their farm for reliable income, then we certainly should make provisions for that and allow them to do that. So far as the runoff and the, quote, pollution from the solar panels, there is none. That's just a non-starter. They're made out of sand, silica. There is no pollutions that come from solar panels. And I can go on, and it's as businesses look into areas, again, we're talking about the young generation, they're looking at communities about what you do and what you don't do, and there's a lot of young kids nowadays and companies that are very conscious about these type of things, and if they see what they consider to be backwards policies, they're not going to look to locate in an area like this. They're going to look in areas that they see where their values and thoughts are considered as well. So I would urge you to make the changes to the proposal and vote it out. And just remember, you can vote and make a proposal that puts so many poison pills in it that there will be no solar projects. So I would urge you to take those poison pills out and pass something that can work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Anyone else? I'll open it up to discussion before I bring up my points.
I think Mr. O'Neill presented some valid points about the future of Currituck, as well as not having backwards mentality about the sources of energy that we prefer to use in the future. And I totally agree with what Mr. O'Neill said and the other 2 gentlemen as well. We don't need to be limiting the ability of landowners to do what they want to do within the UDO. We should be encouraging alternate types of development instead of only residential for our county. We need to diversify more than what we have in the past.
Thank you. So we went over some of this in the work session, but I'm going to go over here publicly so everybody can hear the changes. Section K1A, the text amendment suggested that there include no more than 2 abutting properties on one project application. The planning board, or rather I would like to see this removed as a provision. I don't think there should be a limit on the number of abutting properties. Any questions or concerns about that? Okay. The next one is, no, we got rid of that one. Sorry. Natural heritage, get rid of that one. Minimum size, I think putting a 50% limit is I don't think that's a very good idea, and putting a limit on the size of the projects, I don't think is a very good idea. So my recommendation on that is going to be to get rid of K2A for a maximum SEF project size exceeding 250 acres. So the suggestion is going to be to strike that one altogether. Any comments or concerns? Okay. Setbacks, K3A. The amendment, or the text amendment recommends a 300-foot setback from major arterial streets and 150 feet from all other NCDOT rights of way. I'm going to recommend that this be changed from 300 feet to 150 feet, and from 150 feet to 75 feet. So 150 feet from a major arterial street right of way, and 75 feet from all other NCDOT street rights of way. All right. K3B. I think that was the one we talked about with the extra 70 feet. And was there justification for adding the extra 70 feet, or was it just sort of, I think it'd be a good idea to add 70 feet?
It was just to add additional buffers to your eventual drinking water, bodies of water.
How do you guys feel about?
CAMA requires 30.
CAMA requires 30, and this text amendment is requiring 100.
Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts on that?
What you have here is removing it?
Well, no, taking it down to just, my suggestion was to put it back to the CAMA's original, so which would be 30 feet.
I'm fine with that.
You okay with that as well? You guys okay with that?
And I would suggest that that requirement can then be struck because it's already required
Then
to be 30 feet.
then the recommendation would be to strike that requirement. Okay. So the next one is K3C, which is all SEF projects that include two abutting properties shall meet the setbacks for all interior property lines. We're asking that this be stricken, as we don't believe that the adjoining lots should have a setback.
The comment I'd like to make, sir, would be that the intent of combining properties is to have more land area, and if you are using setbacks on those property lines that existed before the recombination, then it's not logical to do that. That defeats the purpose of connecting abutting lands together.
Right. Anybody have any issues or concerns with that one? The height.
So you're striking that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Recommending. Yep. The height and configuration, we do have someone here. If you don't mind, I'd like them to actually speak to this so that nobody's taking my word for it. The K4 Alpha says that it should be the maximum height of the SEF, including all mounts, panels, and other equipment, shall not exceed 15 feet. Where is... If you could step up, sir, I forget your name already.
Harry.
And tell us who you are and where you're from. Just a quick why it should go to 20.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Eamon Y'all. My name's Harry Johnson. I work for Cypress Creek Renewables. We're a utility scale solar developer. Live at 529 Watauga Street in Raleigh, if you want to include that for the record. The reason that we want to go to 20 is that traditionally across eastern North Carolina, including Currituck County, the standard height for a panel has been 15 feet because they're what you call fixed tilt panels. That is, if you see them, they're usually pointing south towards the equator so they can capture the maximum amount of sunlight, and they just sit there. They don't move. There's a fairly recent innovation in the industry called tracking. And under that technology, instead of the panels just sitting there stationary throughout the day, the panels actually track the sunlight. So they'll start facing east in the morning, and they track with the sun, getting completely horizontal at high noon on the summer solstice, if you want to, I guess, get into details. But then they track towards the west in the evening. And so because of that, even though the average height will vary. The maximum height is 5 feet greater, but that allows the properties to become more attractive. We can capture more sunlight, generate more power that way, and gives us a site a competitive advantage relative to other sites. So if we can throw a tracking system on there, that project becomes more attractive to us. And so I think 20 feet should cover it.
The tracking arrays, it would be covered, but under the 20 feet,
Yeah,
but not under the 15.
that's my understanding.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Thank
And
you, sir.
I'm here for any other kind of technical questions on any of the rest of this ordinance. If you all have questions before you take a
I
vote.
do have one question
Yes, sir.
for you, sir. What is the amount of increase in solar collection between a GPS-driven system versus a stationary system?
So, are you asking with a tracker system?
What is the
Yes.
percent of increase in solar collection between
Yeah.
movable
So-
and non-movable?
Makes me wish I had a whiteboard here. So the difference is that the difference is the amount of solar that we can collect from the sun versus the amount of solar we can put into the grid that we can sell to Dominion or Duke or whoever we're selling the power to. And so what a tracker allows us to do is maximize the amount of time where we're putting as much power as we can onto the grid. And so that's going to vary from project to project. On some projects you're going to have shade or other things that, will affect the total amount of power. But in general, you're looking at, I can't give you a sufficient number, but a significant increase in kind of that where you're having the maximum load go onto the grid during the day.
If you had to make an educated guess,
Percentage-wise.
which you probably
A
might do every
percentage?
now and then,
I
what
don't
would
want to
you
make
say?
an educated guess while I'm standing before a board. My inner lawyer is going to prevent me, but I'm happy to provide that to y'all. I would say that a tracking system that we have, like a 2 megawatt system that we have in terms of AC power that goes in the grid, generally for a tracker, I think we look at about 2.8 megawatts of DC power that we're generating. And I think that's a few, decimal places higher than just a fixed tilt system.
So
But I don't want to get more specific than that.
Yeah, so
without-
approximately 30 or 40% is what you're telling us.
those are your words, but yeah.
Thanks, sir. All right, so the suggestion on that is to increase from 15 feet to 20 feet. Any objection to that, Jane? Okay. The next one was a pretty big bone of contention, but we kind of had to compare this to other industries, and this is for sound. And if you look at K5B, it talks about not being within 1,500 feet of a public school if you're pile driving. But that leaves Saturdays, but the ordinance says no work on Saturdays. So we're going to have to make a modification if this is going to work. So I would say, as long as they're complying with existing noise and light ordinances, that we modify the hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday to 7 a.m., 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday. And this is just during the construction phase. Are there any objections or concerns about that?
Yeah, you're extending it till 10 o'clock at night?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's consistent with the noise.
It's consistent. I put that in there because of the noise ordinance.
Okay.
Chairman, did you say till Saturday?
7 to 10, Monday to Saturday. Yes, ma'am. And again, if you're pile driving and you're within 1,500 feet of a school, the only day you can work is Saturday. So, yeah.
And also the fact that many contractors work on Saturdays and Sundays for that matter, but understand leaving one day of silence for those neighboring properties, but most contractors work Monday through Saturday at least, so it wouldn't be logical to not include Saturdays on work days.
All right, for the buffers, I think,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just for
ma'am.
clarification, strike A and B under 5?
no.
Okay.
Leave B.
Leave B, okay.
Yeah, we're leaving B. That's still, we don't want pile driving during school.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. That's reasonable. So we would just strike, well, not strike A, but modify it to Monday to Saturday, 7 to 10.
7 to 10.
Yep.
Got it.
The next one was the buffers and screening. I know we had some discussion about this during the work session about modifying that. But if we go with the current requirements, I suppose we can leave I mean, how do you guys feel about the final? And according to this, they want it at the start of construction. The suggestion was maybe before final approval.
What is staff's interpretation
Yeah.
of when these plantings should occur?
The way that it is written now is that the plantings have to be in before the start of construction.
So, according to this, before they even start construction, you would have to have a 20-foot buffer in place, opaque buffer in place prior to construction.
You would plant the plantings that would get you to the 20-foot buffer in 3 years. It's allowed 3 years to become 100% opaque. The other option, as it's written, is to do an earthen berm, which of course is immediately opaque.
I'll take suggestions on that.
I'm sure the cost of an earthen berm is much greater than plantings. That would probably be the least desirable for the developer.
I guess my point would be, do we say at the start of construction, or do we say before final approval? That's my only concern.
Do they need to be fully grown?
No. It's same deal where they'd have to be installed. Yeah, planted.
I would say before final approval. I don't really know how you determine when the actual construction starts. If they're out there putting in plantings or building a berm, that's pretty much construction. So I would say final approval.
Would you agree? I think.
That modifying the land in any way could be construed as construction.
Right, exactly. So let's do that. Let's put the modification in there that it would be prior to. I'm not sure the terminology that the
Final inspection.
call it final inspection.
Okay.
Okay, final inspection.
Now, would
Say
that,
that final as well.
Towards the end.
Yeah. Yep.
okay. It doesn't have to be 100% opaque at final inspection.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Just has the same deal with the plantings have to be in place before. Yeah.
Okay.
So the same thing.
Okay.
So are you changing that wording prior to final approval and operation? Or
To final.
Your verbiage is going to be prior to final
Approval.
inspection. Is that? Yeah.
There you go.
Prior to final inspection.
Or we can say something, certificate of compliance.
Right.
Yeah. Whatever the verbiage is you guys use.
Okay,
Yep.
I'll fix that.
so that's questionable, how you word that.
I would suggest we word it prior to the certificate of compliance, which is in line with your final inspection.
Okay.
They happen at the same time.
All right. We'll do that then. The next one is the certification from a landscape architect or certified arborist. As we discussed in the work session, I contacted 2 arborists and several landscapers, and none of them said they could certify any of this. So since we already have measures in place in the UDO to account for this, I think this is kind of redundant and not very cost effective for the applicant if we put this in here. So I would recommend striking that completely. Any questions or concerns? Okay. The next one's going to be K6D. The only modification I would say here, the performance guarantee is fine. In here, it says that to reach 100% opacity within 3 years. I would suggest 5 years, unless someone has a concern with that. I think that's probably about the average.
And not many plants that can grow that quickly in a 3-year period.
Right. So we'll modify that from 3 years to 5 years. I would have moved this to the end, but it's old business. I have to go through it now. This one kind of goes along with the earlier one regarding the interior. This is F. This is K6F. The interior property lines. This requires a type D buffer on the interior property lines. Our suggestion is going to be to go ahead and remove this, strike this.
If I may add, it says it does not require the type D buffer. You would have to meet this, the way it's written now, you would have to meet the setbacks, but you would not have to install the buffer.
Okay. So however we have to word that, like we already said, no setbacks.
Right, so we'll just keep it as it's written. Then if your wish is to not require them to install the
I
buffer.
think we missed the knot in the black.
Oh, yeah, it's not there. Okay. All right. K7A6. And this was something that I got from a couple of the solar companies. This says approval, that they must have approval from access controlling agencies for street access. And this is for the approved major site plan. The recommendation would be a copy of a submission for approval for access controlling agencies for street access. And then approval documentation must be submitted prior to the start of construction. That way, when the major site plan is introduced, they merely have to have a copy of the application, but before construction begins, they have to submit the actual approval.
I have a question on that.
Yes, ma'am.
What happens if it didn't get approved, the street
Then they
access?
can't start construction.
That comment was added because there were some issues with the railroad crossing in Moyock in the beginning. And if we'd known that in the beginning, we would have planned a little differently. But since you're saying prior to the start of construction, I think that would cover the railroad crossings
Right,
as well.
exactly. This next one, the 7B, it says the project shall designate 30% of the total land area in one or combined of the following plans, and it talks about the wildlife resources or the detailing crops and harvest schedule. I looked it up and I couldn't find where there was a requirement for 30%. I mean, is that an industry norm, or is that something that is required by an organization?
This is a relatively new concept by Wildlife Resources Commission to become a reviewing member and to start to require some of these pollinator habitats.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a standard that they suggested, that there's not an industry standard for it yet.
So if we suggested 20, how would that impact us instead of 30%?
It would just be a less area that's covered by these pollinator habitats. One of the issues that we have with one particular solar farm is landscaping maintenance, mowing the grass. And the thought is the more that you have covered in this acceptable habitat, the less likely you will have maintenance of grass issues because you don't mow that. But there's not an industry standard yet.
The concern I got from a couple of the farmers that I spoke with was that they considered it a waste of property if they're using 30% of it for this.
And a lot of the places that are using it now actually are planting under the panels and in the rows of the panels. So I'm not sure how that is a waste of use.
Okay, that's fine.
That also means that they could put these plantings within the boundary area around up to the fence? Is that correct?
Absolutely. If they so choose, whatever, if under the panels and in those rows is not sufficient to get to the percentage that the board decides, then they would come out into those more open areas.
Okay.
So we're going with 20%?
I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
What was it before?
20% theoretically is not a lot if it is planted within the row area of the solar array. But how does that hinder the ability of the solar array? I guess it depends on the type of plants that are planted.
Yeah, the plants that would be required would not get to the height to shade the lower panels, the lower portion of the panels.
so I suppose we could leave it at 30.
And two, I guess there becomes an issue about if I were a farmer, and I am not one, but if I were a farmer, I would have concerns about, or the landowner, I would have concerns about how do I actually harvest these or maintain these without damaging the solar array equipment if they are planted within those rows. That might be a concern for a landowner, unless it's one of these type things where it's a low maintenance type plant that are
Right.
flowering, that promote pollination.
The purpose is to plant it and forget it, pretty much. It's,
A mow-free area.
right, it's
A
it would,
mow-free, maintenance-free, wildlife
very low
preserve.
maintenance. And generally, the ones that we've worked with, the owner of the land is not maintaining the land. It's the owner of the solar array, the equipment itself that's
Okay.
maintaining the
That would
land.
be a part of their lease likely.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, less.
20?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say less.
I think it's 20. Okay, so I think we're going to end up going with 20 instead of 30.
Okay.
And then for 7BI, it talks about the Wildlife Resource Commission, the approval from the Wildlife Resource Commission. But I also saw where one of the municipalities that I called had, rather than the Wildlife Resource Commission, it said best management practices as prescribed by the NC Cooperative Extension Service or the WRC or NCDA. So does it have to be from the one organization? Is there any regulation that forces us to go?
As long as those other entities are capable of developing a plan, I don't see why it couldn't include more than.
Okay, so let's go ahead and include those in there. That way we're not limited to just one organization. And then, of course, number 2 would just be the same change, the 20%.
So overall, the project would contain 30% of either the native pollinator habitat or continue to be farmed.
20%
So okay, that's right, 20% there. Got
of
it.
either or, a 1 or 2.
Either or.
Yes.
Or a combination of both.
Or a combination
Okay.
of both. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Number 8A2, herbicides. This is farmland we're talking about, and they put herbicides on the farmland. I don't see a reason why we should prohibit herbicides on the farmland. You guys agree?
I agree.
We're telling the farmers they can do it, but the solar folks they can't.
Any person that has $15 can go out and buy herbicide at
Weed
your
killer.
local hardware store or a big box store, and it's regulated. I guess if there were a problem, then perhaps a professional applicator might be the solution if there was concern about whether or not it would be applied correctly according to the label.
So in a nutshell, we would recommend to strike that.
Strike number 8 completely.
No. Well, what's 8C?
Oh, no, because you're gonna go back to.
Eight.
No, no, no.
Water, okay.
No.
8H.
Herbicide use.
Yeah, just number 2, herbicides. Groundwater monitoring wells. There was a lot on groundwater monitoring wells. We recommended a few changes. Number one, I'll defer to you guys. We looked at several of the aquifers, different depths. What's going to be the recommendation for testing for drinking water? We doing 20 feet, 50 feet, 90 feet?
I can check with the health department, because it's referencing their
Well,
standard.
the health department says minimum 20 feet.
Then that's what we would recommend.
So you would recommend 20 feet? I called them today. Okay. So I would,
Are they necessary at all?
well, that's what I was going to go into for the rest of this. So there are no other monitoring wells, as far as I know, and you can probably back me up on this, in the United States at all for any solar facilities. That's the two folks that were here from the Ecoplexus and the other company last time said as much, that there were no monitoring wells that they know of. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned with it, and I understand that the public has some concerns with it. So we've kind of come up with a middle ground. This talked about quite a number of monitoring wells on a single property, including one every 2,000 feet, one on the borders, and several others. So some of the modifications were well, first of all, for the groundwater monitoring wells, maybe we put some verbiage in there to, if you want to verify with the health department that 20 feet.
Do that.
Okay. And then number 1, it says monitoring wells installed prior to construction. So this would be 2 monitoring wells. In a nutshell, you would 2 monitoring wells, one in the center of the project and one at the lowest point in the project, the lowest point. And if those 2 points are within 50 feet of one another, they can do a single monitoring well, rather than putting wells all over the properties. I mean, if for some reason these things are contaminating, they're going to contaminate in the middle just as much as they are on the edges, if not more so.
I understand.
For number 3, recommend striking that completely, because we're going back to the 2 wells. Testing, I think we sort of modified that. I think we'll go ahead and go with number 5. What was suggested in the amendment to test for all of those contaminants, but on number 4, the periodicity would be prior to construction to get a base test. Then the next test would be 2 years from the first test. And if any evidence of increased contamination is found in any test, any subsequent test, then it goes on a year-to-year basis. And each time that there's an increase, then they have to do it again within 1 year. If after 2 years there is no increase from the base test, they can go to every 3 year, or 3 years later. If no contaminants are found, they can go every 5 years until decommissioning, and then they do a test at decommissioning. So if there are no contaminants, you would be at 2 years, 3 years, and then every 5 years. Any discussions about that? I mean, we're the first ones in the country doing this, so we're going to kind of be the example.
Take a base sample to
Yeah,
see that.
exactly. Any concerns about this?
I don't have a concern about those, but I do want to make mention to the public and those who are here in the audience and watching elsewhere is that the reasoning behind wanting to test water samples is not necessarily about what's happening right this moment, but this solar technology may not be the ultimate final use of the property. It may be a temporary use for a period of 25 or 30 years, whatever the solar developer contracts with a landowner, and at some point in the future, possibly this could be residential or converted to residential, and the importance of the water at that time will be much greater than it is right now. So that's the logic behind wanting to test water prior to construction and then intermittently during the time that the array exists and then at the time of decommissioning. That's the logic behind that.
All right, for number 6, I kind of struggled with that one a little bit, but I see sort of the need to add that. This is the Board of Commissioners may require testing for other contaminants. But I think we need to add verbiage in there. Only the contaminants that are required to be tested by the health department, or some verbiage along those lines.
And I believe the list that exists here is all of those contaminants, organic and inorganic, that the health department checks for.
There's a few more.
Yeah,
that
the
health
list was cut
department
down.
checks for, but
Yeah.
they really were not like. There's no need to check for chlorine
Yeah,
here. in those
yeah.
ones.
So you don't want to get some crazy Board of Commissioners that says we want you to test for chlorine, just because. So verbiage in there that would say that that it has to be in compliance with the requirements for the health department. We're getting down to the end, folks. Just a couple more. So for 10C, decommissioning plan updated every 2 years. I would suggest we do that every 5 years. There's a cost associated with that, and the cost of decommissioning is probably not going to change significantly in 2 years. So if they update it every 5 years, you're still updating it 6 times in a lease period. So I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
Are you going to leave the change of ownership?
Yeah, the rest of the verbiage would remain the same. Just the periodicity would go from 2 to 5 years. So on D, I have down there, just please elaborate, and I'm going to let Stephen address this one because we talked about it at length earlier.
A question that I had regarding 10D was, it states the SCF owner shall have 12 months to complete decommissioning of the facility if no electricity is generated for a continuous 12-month period. And from what I have observed and read about photovoltaic systems is that they do have a finite lifespan, but that lifespan can vary significantly between one panel and another. So let's say, using the example of a lease being for 30 years for a landowner, and these panels intermittently are being replaced as they go bad. There may come a point at the end of the lease period when there is still electricity being generated, even though perhaps a portion of those panels are not at full capacity. I don't know what the statistics are about how long a solar panel emits 100% efficacy, but I do know that they degrade over time, and having the word no means zero. I'm not sure if we need to have a different indicator there instead of no being zero, or a certain percent of total capacity, because they're going to be intermittently being replaced here and there. And then the fact that they degrade over time, there may be no point when no electricity is being generated during that time.
This was particularly referencing project abandonments. So
Halfway through the lease.
halfway through the lease, power company's out, we're done with this. So then they've turned off the power, just for lack of a better word, and it's no longer generating power to the grid. If that happens for 12 months, then we're saying you've got to take it
makes
out,
sense.
even if you still have a 30-year lifespan for that project. If it stops at year 10, we don't want it to sit there for 20 more years.
Okay.
We want the ability to be able to take it down sooner
That's
than
what
that.
we wanted
Okay.
you all to elaborate.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and I want to back up just a minute up to number C. You're changing it, I lost it again here, on change of ownership. Sorry, I lost it again.
Nope. You're good.
For the decommissioning and so forth. That bothers me. Does it mean, every time, if the property is inherited, not just sold?
Well, yeah, it would have to be inherited or sold because you're changing ownership.
Okay, so if it's inherited, it's still the same change of ownership?
Mhm.
Okay.
Make sense?
Because is that going to be a real major cost?
The owners don't incur the cost. It's the facility that incurs the cost.
All right.
The landowner doesn't incur the cost. Unless that's in the lease. Hopefully it's not in the lease.
Or no, it must not.
So for F4, the performance guarantee amount shall be reviewed every 2 years as part of the decommissioning plan update. Since we've changed that to 5 years, we'd modify this to every 5 years as well. We're done. Is there any other discussion amongst the board members?
Did you strike this whole thing out?
Yeah, no. They're,
Salvage value?
yeah, we had, yeah,
That's good.
yeah, that's gone.
Yeah, good.
So that one was just 5 years. Any other comments or concerns?
I have a comment or two.
Sir.
Brief. The way that we received the solar text amendment from the county was not written well, and it would have stifled growth of the solar industry within our county, and it is not logical to stifle growth of alternative sources of energy, nor is it logical to restrict property owners' rights about what they can do with their land and prohibit them from joining lands neighboring properties in order to create a larger solar array facility. It doesn't make sense. It's not good for the county. It's not good for the citizens. And many of these items that Fred, you worked so hard on, are logical, and they create a better text amendment than what we received initially.
Thank you. Any other comments? Do you have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion if I can get this correct. I'll motion to approve the document that we just went over with the changes we just made. PBR or PB 17-14. Because,
Mr. Balance, can I interrupt you a moment?
absolutely.
Lori, in his motion, because he's moving to deny the original written text, does he have to say deny
and substitute the other?
Well, I think it's just like with any other amendment. We just make a motion to approve with the amendments.
That's correct.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Like I was going, or
Mhm.
do I need-
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Okay. This?
Yeah. But use the verbiage with the amendments. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm motioning to approve PB 17-14, the document we just went over with the changes we just went over. The request zoning is consistent with the land use plan. It provides active agriculture lands having high productive potential and conserves those lands for continued agriculture use. Solar, AG1. It provides new and expanding industry that trains and utilizes a more highly skilled labor force and diversifies the local economy. The request is reasonable and in the public interest. It prevents incompatible solar array projects from being established that could adversely impact the quality of life for the county residents.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes.
If I may.
Yes, ma'am.
I feel comfortable that I've captured all of our notes, but I would like to send it to the board just to check behind me before we send it forward.
You also have that other document that I gave you as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Whew. All right. What's our next one? That's solar text.
What's our next
All right, the next one is PB 1826. And I'm not showing anybody signed up to speak for 1826. Is there anybody here to speak for 1826? This is the David Shields. Mr. Shields, can you come up and state your name and where you live? And then I'll ask you to have a seat while the staff presents.
David Shields, live in Southern Shores, 118 Tall Pine Lane.
All right, thank you, sir. If we could have staff, this is Jason. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to start out by just giving a little bit of history of the property. It's located in Grandy. It's an established commercial property, a couple of different uses there. It used to be a restaurant. Now it's primarily a convenience store and an arcade now. And so that's been zoned general business for a while. Sometime in the past, the lot behind the general business lot was purchased. It was Lot 1 in Soundside Estates. And then it was subsequently recombined. So now it's all one property with two zoning districts. That's how we ended up there, because the subdivision was zoned to agriculture. So that's where we are, and the reason they're coming in for the rezoning today is they need to use that area that's still zoned general business for a septic system. They're proposing to put a small laundromat in the far end of that Flippers building out there by the highway. And so because that area is not zoned for commercial use, they have to rezone it in order to put that septic system in. The land use plan classifies this area as full service. That's compatible with the proposed uses. In particular, policies CD2, CD4, and ED4, commercial policies and economic policies that the request is consistent with. That's about it, really.
All right.
Yeah. So, but the zoning map request is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the land use plan. Is compatible with existing and proposed uses surrounding the land, and it's an appropriate zoning district and use of the land. It's also reasonable and in the public interest because it would result in logical and orderly development, and it also addresses a demonstrated community need.
Thank you, sir.
If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, I have a
Questions
question.
for staff? So we'll go, Jane.
you said in the beginning of the report that this is a full service.
It is,
Okay.
yes.
They don't have public sewer,
They do not.
okay. Hence the septic tank.
Right.
And you said in the work session that this is not an engineered septic, it's just a larger septic.
Is that correct, Mr. Shields?
The septic was, there's 3 septic tanks behind the building.
Go ahead, come on up, Mr. Shields. I'm sorry. Yep.
What it is for the laundromat, it's a small laundromat. It's only 6 washing machines. But the septic tank that was engineered, and it's already been approved through the health department, but the way it was built, and we didn't realize it at the time, the drain field goes back on that back lot. The septic system itself is all on the commercial lot directly behind the building. There's 3 tanks. And then after it goes through the third one, it's pumped back for the drain field. And the drain field's on the back lot that's zoned agriculture and not commercial. So that's what we're trying to get.
So this
changed
isn't really
drain
for
field.
the tank itself, it's for the lot, for the drain
All
field.
3 tanks are actually on the commercial property.
So they're already in
Yeah,
place.
it's just drain fields. If you
Just a drain field.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can see the lines coming out there
Yep.
on the
Yeah.
site plan.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Or? All right, go ahead, Mr. Shields. Did you want to present or?
No, I don't know if it's any, you have any other questions
Okay.
for
Do
me,
you guys
or-
have any questions for Mr. Shields?
I think,
I would like to add that this used to be a lot, I guess, in the residential zoning district, and there people that live back there may have concerns about this being rezoned, but I feel like the fact that it's septic lines that are going in there might actually be a good thing because it prevents anything else from being built on top of that. So it's
Okay.
kind of like a little buffer, a protective buffer for the subdivision.
And there wasn't anybody to speak. Just Mr. Shields. Okay.
Neighboring property owners were, I'm sure, notified.
Everybody within 200 feet, isn't that correct?
That's right.
So they've had a chance to be here if they were going to be here.
All right. Any discussion?
Yeah, there was also a community meeting that no one came to. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty much a no-brainer to allow that in order to have these septic drain fields exist there. And like you said, it provides a buffer to the subdivision to the east of it. It shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. Being that there was a community meeting and no one came to it to oppose it, that appears to be a good sign that perhaps no one does oppose it.
All right. Any more discussion? Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve PB 18-26 David Shields' request for a zoning map amendment. The zoning map amendment request is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the land use plan, is compatible with existing and proposed uses surrounding the land subject to the application, and is an appropriate zoning district and use for the land. It is reasonable and in the public interest because it will result in a logical and orderly development pattern and addresses a demonstrated community need.
I second it.
First, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is PB 1825 Fairby Acres. Do we have someone here to present for Fairby Acres? Just please state your name and address and have a seat for a moment.
I'm Warren Edis with Quibel and Associates.
All right. Thank you. And this one is Jenny.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have papers in order here. So this is a request to relocate an existing split zoning of approximately 7.7 acres on a 58-acre tract of land from general business to agriculture. The property is located in Moyock, just north of Beechwood Shores. There's an aerial to orient you to the property. The land use plan classifies the site as rural, and there's also some conservation on the site. Currently, you can see the land is vacant. There are 2 existing billboards in the general business zoning of this lot. Okay, so the applicant, like I said before, the applicants are seeking to relocate the zoning, and you can see, well, it's kind of hard to see, but no, go back to the other one. There's kind of a line there of red that follows the parcel line of the existing. Thank you, Tammy. And so the area to the north is the area to be rezoned from general business to agriculture, and it's approximately 7.7 acres, as I said before. The entire tract cannot be rezoned if they want to keep and they do want to keep the 2 existing billboards. Those billboards are required to remain in the general business zoning district. The applicants have stated, and Warren, you can speak to their intent after the rezoning is approved. Okay. So as I mentioned before, the land use plan classifies this site as rural within the Moyock sub-area, and the policy emphasis for the rural sub-area is intended to provide for agriculture, forestry, and other allied uses. Preferred uses include very low-density dispersed development associated directly with farm uses. The proposed zoning map amendment is in keeping with the policy of the land use plan, some of which are outlined in your staff report. Policy AG4, protection to agriculture and resource-based activities from incompatible land uses, and ML1, preserving farmland and open space. When a zoning map amendment is heard by the board, it's a legislative decision, and in determining whether to approve or deny a zoning map amendment, the board should adopt a statement of reasonableness and consistency. Staff recommends approval of this plan because the request is consistent with the county's adopted land use plan. It's compatible with existing and proposed uses. It's a downzoning of a portion of GB property to ag. It will result in a logical and orderly development pattern. Permissible uses in ag are less intensive than those permissible in the GB zoning district, and the land use plan policies support the agricultural zoning over the general business uses on this property. Again, staff recommends approval.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have one for you. You mentioned the 2 billboards. If it goes back to agriculture, will they have to remove the 2 billboards?
Can you go back and show the map there? So the portion that's remaining general business is where the billboards are.
Okay, so the whole pink is not going to commercial.
Correct. It's not. There's not a change to commercial. There's only a downzoning from commercial to cultural, and the hatch portion up there of the red that's at the top, pink at the top, is the portion that's requested to be rezoned from general business to agricultural, a straight down zoning of property.
Not the entire pink.
Not the entire tract, correct.
That's fine.
Any other questions for staff? Warren, is your last name pronounced Edis? All right, Mr. Edis.
Thanks, Jenny. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Board. As Jenny stated, we're just requesting downzoning of what equates to 7.7 acres of general business to agriculture. The zoning line that's shown on the map that you've got in front of you is, I don't believe we've got a meets and bound description for that line. It's just one of these instances where we have a large tract and it's got what we call split zoning. The intent is to move that line a little closer to the highway. We're not going to really radically change the use of the property, but what that does is it'll keep the billboards in general business, so we won't have a problem with that. Put 7.7 acres into agriculture zoning, and then we're going to follow this with a minor subdivision to create lots along the highway in that portion that is GB. After that, the intent, and this is something that could happen in the future, would be a conservation subdivision. So that's kind of where the thinking is with this property. We did hold a community meeting It was not necessary. The decision to go to a straight down zoning was made days prior to the meeting. We decided to carry it out anyway. A couple of members from the community came. There's extensive notes and photographs in our community meeting that's included in your packet, but there was really no objections to what we were proposing. As Jenny stated, we feel like this is reasonable. I don't want to say it's cleaning up the GIS zoning map, but in essence it is. We're going to have a meets and bounds description on that, so we're going to have a defined break between that GB and the ag. And another benefit will be that, the density will come down by removing that 7.7 acres. Certainly it can be developed, but you could go from 65% impervious area to about 30%. So I think that's a good thing for this location. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Discussion?
This also appears to be one of those no-brainer type situations. Typically, an applicant is not lowering their ability to do something like the applicant is doing here. Most of the time it is applying to do a greater use, so this is rare. And we don't get many of these like this, but I understand the concept, and it is logical by what they're doing to increase land area, which will lower the densities.
Any other discussion? Do you have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. A motion that we approve PB 1825 because the request is consistent with the land use plan. It's reasonable for the public and in the interest of the public.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Sorry. Do I have a second?
I would say it might be better to include a little bit more consistency and reasonable statement, page 45.
145?
45
I got you.
at the bottom, it might help.
In the blue part?
Below the blue.
Below the blue.
Where the little dot is?
And it is also compatible with the existing and proposed uses of surrounding the land subject to the application, and is the appropriate zoning district and use for the land. The request, a downzoning of a portion of GB zoned property to AG, is compatible with the existing and proposed uses as a straight rezoning of the entire property. To AG would create bifurcated GB zone parcels adjacent to Currituck Highway. Additionally, a straight rezoning of the entire property to AG would require removal of the existing billboards, as billboards may only continue in the location of the GB zoning district. Existing uses adjacent to the property include vacant property on and single-family dwellings. An adjacent single-family dwelling is located in the GB zoning district.
All right, I have an amended motion.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so carries. All right, the next item on the agenda is PB 0848, Cape Currituck. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Chris Alexander. Yeah, down here you've got listed for PB 1848. I believe you meant 0848? 08. Okay. And is there anyone else? Okay, I'm sorry. I have Kathleen Saunders, Mark Laws, Tom Voorhees, Chris Alexander. Is anyone else here to speak? And your name, sir? Oh, okay. You put okay. Let me put the yep. 0848. All right. I'll ask you guys to come up in a moment. Just out of curiosity, Raise your hand if you're in favor of. Opposed? All right, so that makes it a little easier when we do our, okay. So staff, if we could, this is Tammy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is currently an approved plan for this development. It's a planned unit development, and they are requesting an amendment to that approved plan. And that's what we'll be discussing tonight. To orient the board, this is Kimarlik subdivision. The new cottages at Kimarlik are in this area. And if you follow West Side Lane until it runs out, it will take you to this development. You can see the zoning does contain that conditional district PUD. And the land use plan actually has several classifications on the map, including conservation and full service. Just to orient the board, this is the approved plan as it stands now. They could develop this as it is. Now, staff has determined that the plan that you are seeing. Let me see what I put. Okay. This is the newly requested layout, and what happened was they got the county approvals and then moved forward for state and federal approvals. And you'll see this is a connection to the water out to the Albemarle Sound. So it involved multiple state and federal agency approvals after they got their county approval. In that process, layouts changed. The canal realignment was necessary. During that time frame, wetland delineations changed, so they did, in fact, lose some of their uplands. So that brings us to the change that they're requesting. I will state that the plan still does include a public boat ramp, which is a requirement based, it's a county requirement. Let's go through the changes that are being proposed, and this is just very, very general, so stop me if you have specific questions. The approved plan had a canal. It's simply realigned. The dwelling count has gone down from 237 to 160. Density has reduced from 1.97 to 1.33. Wetland fill has significantly reduced from 2.7 acres to 0.48 acres. The structure setbacks were 100 feet from mean high water mark. They're bringing those in line with the county ordinance requirement of 30 foot. That's the same with the required open space along the water's edge. They're bringing that from the 100 foot to the 30 foot area that's consistent with the ordinance today. And also, when you look at the overall map of what's approved, when I'm getting ready to speak to the transition from the Kimarlik subdivision to this development. The approved plan in place, there's one lot, I believe, in Kimarlik that touches this. Would be a single family dwelling to more intense. This was condo units. So to a more intense use. And so in order to make that transition a little easier, or a little more compatible, I should say, they have changed that and put the single-family units next to the Kimarlik lots as opposed to the higher density townhome units. The staff is recommending approval of the change. It's consistent with the land use plan, and I am not going to sit here and read all the policies in your packet, but you can see those in the packet. The policy emphasis for the Point Harbor sub-area is to allow the area to continue to grow and evolve as a full-service community, but with better attention to planning needed to protect residential areas and the natural features that make the area so attractive. There are also some vegetative buffers that are being provided between developments that are not necessary. The proposed plan is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the land use plan, and it is compatible with existing and proposed uses surrounding the land, and it's the appropriate zoning district for the area that it's in. Let me, before I get that far. And then conditions of approval is what we'll talk about next. All of the conditions of approval that are a part of the approved plan, we have agreed with the applicant that they would remain in place. There's a couple that are changing, and staff has agreed to these changes. And those are the things that we just discussed about, let's see, the proposed fill being reduced. What you see underlined in your packets, those are the only changes to those existing conditions. You'll see where we talked about changing the 100-foot to the 30-foot. We're putting the new plan date as a reference to what they have to develop in accordance with and those kinds of things. Staff has a concern. Let me go back to the plan here. Staff has a concern, I won't call it a huge concern, but a concern. If you look in the back here, this is where the wastewater treatment plant is, which is appropriate, as well as where the truck with trailer parking is for the marina. And the boat launch is going to be in this area. So you would put your boat out, you would unload all your stuff, and then you would drive. It's about 0.4 of a mile. Leave your truck with trailer back in this area, and then you would walk back to the boat launch. So staff is suggesting perhaps if there can be a different alignment or a different location for the parking. We understand that that's pretty difficult because of the limited uplands of the area, or that they provide some kind of transportation for these people, or that they provide an adequately marked walking path with safe crossings so people know where they're going and get them there safely. The only other, it's not a concern, just a suggestion that the board may want to have a conversation with the applicant. There are certain benchmarks in the approved plan of when a certain number of units happen to when something is triggered. For example, there were 237 units previously, and at 50 units, the public marina would be fully permitted. So don't know if you want to adjust that 50 units, since now instead of 237, it's 160. Staff doesn't have a preference, but it was something that was brought to our attention that may want to be considered. Previously, at 100 units, that triggered the CO for the marina. And at 150 units, that triggered the commercial components being constructed. This is just a zoomed-in area of that parking that we were talking about. This is actually a new layout we got this afternoon. A realignment with the wastewater treatment plant on this side now to make it more compatible with some property owners over here. And they were able to add some additional parking areas to provide for the public. These are the elevations that the applicant are proposing. That would be, of course, your multifamily building or your condos, townhomes. These are the single-family units, different variations of the single-family units. So staff does recommend approval, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah. Ms. Glave, when it comes to the turning radii, that would be needed for vehicles pulling trailers. Is there adequate space in the revised plat amendment that you received today in that parking area? Is it easier now for a person to park a vehicle and trailer connected?
Yes, they've run all the turning software calculations to make sure. And a matter of fact, not only did they provide adequate turning here, I was initially concerned about the turning radii here at the boat ramp. If you back something in, but they have adjusted since we expressed that concern, and they've run some software to show us the turning radii to make sure they're appropriate.
On the amended plan that you received, that section today, did it show also any changes to having a more secure walking path or more secure areas where pedestrians may cross?
Not with this portion, because what we received today was primarily to show us, hey, we're keeping you in the loop. We've had discussions with the property owner. We're flopping the technical term there. We're flopping the wastewater treatment plant to the other side to make it more compatible with an adjoining user.
So the staff still have concerns about pedestrian traffic to and from the
Sure.
ramp area to the parking area?
Yes. And it's something that can be easily addressed with signage, crossings, those kinds of things.
Thank you, Ms. Glade.
Any other questions for staff? All right, so I'll read this since we have opposition as well. The applicant and persons in support of the request have a total of 20 minutes to present their proposal. Persons in opposition of the request have a total of 20 minutes to make comments, and then the applicant will have a 5-minute rebuttal. So of those that have signed up that are in opposition, can you please raise your hand? Just 2, 3? So what we'll do is we can split it up about 6 or 7 minutes each, if that's how you want to do it, or if you want to defer your time to one person. Your choice. Okay. So who's here to present for BBO 848? I'm sorry, is that the right one?
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Saunders, and I'm with Quibble and Associates, and we're here representing the applicant. I would like to go over a couple of additional items. I know Tammy went over everything in great detail, but as she said, we have a previously approved plan from 2008, which had 237 units and conditions that went along with those units. For that plan, there were wetlands fill throughout in order to place the wastewater treatment plant as well as the condos. The 100-foot setback was accounted for within the conditions, but in some areas of the master plan it wasn't reflected. And because of these items, we had to kind of revise the entirety of the layout, and that downed us to the 160 units. With doing the 160 units, we've made the site more environmentally friendly. We now have minimal wetland fill at less than half an acre, and we are also including the environmental buffers as stated within the current UDO, and that is the 30-foot buffer. We have, talking to state and federal agencies, we are going to provide a 42-acre environmental enhancement area of natural ecosystems, and we are going to be using mitigation banks to mitigate for any impacts that we might have, as well as preserving existing wetlands that are not proposed to be filled. So these are different areas that we are making it more environmentally friendly compared to the plan that is currently approved. In addition, we are going to be using low impact development practices, using permeable pavers, wetlands, wet ponds to address stormwater at the site. And that's on the current plan. It kind of compares to the previously approved plan in the way that the previously approved plan also had the on-site wastewater treatment plant, small commercial hub with the boat marina, public boat access, and pedestrian access throughout. All of those items would be consistent with our current proposed plan.
The current proposed plan will meet TRC review standards with regard to fire, access, parking, landscaping, and UDO requirements as we go further through the process. So there are a couple of items that I would like to kind of talk. We had a community meeting, obviously, and we went through in detail with the citizens what their concerns were, and I'd like to talk to those key concerns. So the first key concern that we had was traffic, commercial and residential, the safety and the use of West Side Lane as an entrance. For that concern, I would like to offer that West Side Lane is currently the only available access to us for this site due to wetlands and the sound. We have wetlands on all three sides of the property. The only other option we would have for another access would be across Kilmarlock Club property, which is not currently owned by the developer. And it is not something that was favorable to the homeowners association or the members that were there at our public meeting. In saying that, we have met with NCDOT on site on November 8th, and we've talked to them about West Side Lane and the current compliance standards for West Side Lane and this size development going in back there. NCDOT is in agreement that West Side Lane is compliant with their standards and it is acceptable for this subdivision that is going in. The second key concern that we had from our community meeting was that a public boat ramp is not desired by the adjoining residents. That being said, the developer would be willing to remove the proposed public boat ramp. However, that is a condition that has been placed on them by the county, so that would be up to the boards to be something that would be removed. The third key concern I would like to go over would be property values. An appraisal has not been performed. However, the developer anticipates that the proposed marina access to the intercoastal waterway would positively impact surrounding areas. The fourth key concern that came up within our community meeting was screening between Kilmarlock and Cape Currituck. As you can see along the main road here at Hillock Drive, we would have a 20-foot minimum building setback line that is proposed. The closest building is about 45 foot from that property line. We would maintain existing vegetation to the extent practical, and then we would also be providing a 10-foot minimum vegetated buffer along that property line. And something else that was added on during our community meeting was to provide a privacy fence along Hillock Drive and Lot 175 in order to deter residents from walking from one subdivision into the other. So that kind of goes over the key concerns that we had from our community meeting. So now I'd like to speak to the access to adjacent property, and that was the exhibit that we provided today to Tammy. The property in the rear has access, easement access across, a 20-foot access easement. So what we have done, they would like their access easement as far as possible from the wastewater treatment plant. So to alleviate those concerns, we have flipped the wastewater treatment plant to the opposite side to allow the straight thoroughfare through to their property. And we propose that we would complete this as an amendment to the current plan that's under review prior to board approval. Something else based on county concerns with the boat parking being here in the rear, something that we have considered and would be willing to consider would be shuttles from this area up to the boat ramp, if that's necessary, or even having golf carts back here that would take people from this area up to the boat ramp. So that kind of goes over the main concerns that I wanted to bring up to you guys. We have run, as Tammy said, we have run auto turn, and most of our drive aisles throughout the parking area have been widened to 32 to 35 foot wide to allow for boat maneuvering. And then we have also run auto turn, assuming a locking angle of 31.6 degrees, just to make sure that we get the boats in, get them parked.
All right, any questions for the applicant?
Not right now.
All right, was there anyone else in support that would like to speak? Tom?
I'm here.
If you could step up a little, yeah. that'd be fine.
I'm 118 Douglas Way. here representing the board. Just wanted to state some concerns we have, not necessarily for or against, but just want to address some concerns. So I don't know if you want me to go now, I can.
Sure. We're going to have those guys up in a second. Go ahead.
Okay. As the board of directors of the Kilmarnock Residential Community Association, we have heard a great number of safety concerns from many of our owners and residents regarding increased traffic from the Cape Currituck development. We would like the Currituck County Commissioners and the North Carolina Department of Transportation to take into consideration the safety of the residents in the community, which frequently has pedestrian traffic. Westside Lane, the road which will connect Cape Currituck to the Currituck Highway, has many bends that would make it difficult to see pedestrians and especially small children without adequate response time. There are no streetlights on Westside Lane, which would make it challenging for people to be seen during early morning or evening hours. There are also no sidewalks, which will force pedestrians to share a relatively narrow road with vehicular traffic, including large commercial, industrial, and construction vehicles. After the construction is complete, traffic will continue to significantly increase with trucks pulling boats to the marina in Cape Currituck, as well as the people visiting. Vendors for the marina, maintenance and commercial vehicles, etc. There's also the issue of large construction vehicles competing for space on the winding road. As it is now, for example, there can be congestion with the building of homes, school buses, trash collection. With an increase in traffic, this potentially could lead to vehicle collisions and or property damage. Throughout the day, there are numerous people, including families, children, out walking, running, or playing golf. As a community, we feel that these safety issues should be taken into consideration, as well as possible solutions, installation of sidewalks to prevent pedestrians from having to share a road with industrial and commercial vehicles that could help reduce the risk of serious injury or worse. And we just wanted to make a point that that this letter is also being sent out to the Board of Commissioners as well to address the road safety concerns, and doesn't reflect any views as a development as a whole. And that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. I appreciate it. All right. So, gentlemen in the back, like I said, we can do 7 minutes each, or you can just have one person come up. Sure, sir.
Is everyone that has for it spoken?
Oh, I'm sorry. Warren, are you still?
It's all right. I'm representing the applicant, so I was just going to.
Do you want to just do the rebuttal?
Sure.
Well, we're going to wait for them, and then you can do the rebuttal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they still have other people for it? Not against
It was just Warren and
Mark
no.
Laws, 216 West Side Lane. I've lived in Kilmarnock subdivision for about 5 years now. If we would have known at the time about this development, we probably would have not bought in there. That's simply saying. Kilmarnock is unlike a lot of neighborhoods within Currituck. West Side Lane is very much unlike a state road. It's not striped. It's winding. Houses are set off the road at the minimum offset to be, for minimum access. And like Tom had just said, we're a very pedestrian community. Not necessarily this time of year, but you would say spring, summer, and fall, we have people out daily on their golf carts, kids out riding their bikes, parents, grandparents walking their kids, and there's 3 golf court crossings that intersect West Side Lane. Plus, this is the main thoroughfare for the maintenance equipment and those workers to go back and forth early in the morning. And to hear this board talk about the safety concerns of the new development, where no safety concerns has been taken into account for the residents of Kilmarnock. No plans to put in traffic calming areas. No plans for sidewalks. Nothing. I have myself talked to NCDOT, and their main concern is will be when both these developments are fully up. So you're talking 350 homes in Kilmarnock, or not for 350, but 175 homes possibly in Kilmarnock, another 160 homes in Cape Currituck. So if you add all that up to 2 vehicles per house, so that's 700 vehicles right there. That doesn't even take into account the boat slips, the number of boat slips that are going to be permanently rented, and the boat ramp traffic. So you're talking a lot of traffic up and down West Side Lane, not to mention a 3 to 5 year spread for heavy construction. But when all this is done, NCDOT is going to come out and evaluate. But they're only going to evaluate the intersection of West Side and 158. They're not going to do anything to evaluate West Side Lane as the access is. And to me, that would be too late. You know, I feel like they should do a traffic assessment now and do some engineering studies just to make sure that the road itself can hold up to all this, and the safety factors that I've already spoken about. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Hey, Warren, did you want to come up for the rebuttal?
Yeah, I'll be brief. We take safety concerns seriously. When we met with DOT on site, they indicated that 2,000 trips a day is sort of the threshold for when they would request a traffic study. We agree with the folks in Kilmarnock that some traffic calming on West Side Lane would be something that we would be, we're behind it. However, Kilmarnock has right-of-ways, they have a POA, they have monetary reserves. We feel like if they should maybe implement that themselves. We're taking a plan of 237 units and we're reducing it to 160. So we feel like we've come back with a plan that's a betterment, and so that's my rebuttal, I guess. Thank you.
Any questions for? All right, thank you, sir. Comments, discussion?
It appears that the revised plan is constructed better. It looks to be more orderly how they reoriented since 2008, 10 years ago. And I'm glad to see the addition and the swapping, the technical term, of the sewer plant versus the parking area. And I'm assuming by traffic calming, you're talking perhaps speed bumps or some other method of controlling speed or volume. Is that right, Mr. Edis?
Yeah, we mentioned speed bumps with DOT, and they don't like that word.
No,
Fire
they don't.
code does not like them either.
They don't like it at all.
Things like Duck has done on NC-12, those are some ideas. It's really perception. You certainly don't want to make the road wider. Make it wider and straighter, people go faster. So I think that the idea of this community is that it works in synergy with the golf course and the rest of Lower Currituck. It's not an intention to come in and mess up what everybody else has got going on. It's to add to it.
If I may make a suggestion, and I've suggested this to other developers, not a requirement at all, just a suggestion, a friendly suggestion. I go to a lot of the community meetings and I see people asking questions that have absolutely nothing to do with what the applicant is trying to do. They'll ask questions about overcrowding of schools. They'll ask questions about crime and other statistics that have nothing to do with what's being presented. And those that are presenting it, there's really no good way to answer it. So my suggestion to them has always been, why don't you, as the developer, get with some of these, not just a couple of homeowners, but get with the leaders in the community and try to sit down and talk to them about the things that you have control over, the things you don't have control over, and try to come to some resolution that way. Not required at all, but it goes a long way with both this board and the commissioners, if you can get the homeowners to stand up here and say, we've worked with Quibble or whoever the applicant is, and I think we've come up with a pretty good solution on how to resolve this. Just a suggestion. Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Of the board?
The developer, the board in general.
We don't.
Yeah, they still have some time, I think.
Okay. Huh?
16.
Yeah. Come on up.
Minutes.
Sitting back, listening to everyone.
If you could introduce yourself, sir, and
I have a few questions for you.
Yep.
My name is Ray Bruce. I am a property owner in Kilmarlock. And I've been out at the site, and I've seen pretty much, where the development's going to come. I have a couple of fundamental questions, since this is a realignment of the initial approval. The canal, the elevation in conjunction with the marina, is it pretty much at sea level or sound level?
I'll defer to staff.
I defer to smart people.
Well, the reason I'm asking this is from an environmental perspective. It seems like a pretty straight run, this canal to the sound. I'm assuming there's nothing provided in the way of floodgates to keep that sound from washing in to this lake area and creating extensive flooding and perhaps some environmental concerns, especially if you can have fuel on site and those type of things. And I say this because I've experienced it. I've seen it in Irene, where the sound completely emptied over to Roanoke Island. Manio had 10 feet of water downtown. I've seen it after that when the sound washed into where I live. Okay, I also have a residence in Nag's Head, in the village of Nag's Head. And water came inwards, upwards of 8 feet, 10 feet. Created a lot of property damage and golf front damage along the sound side. So I'm looking at this and I'm figuring two things. And number one, I don't know what percentage of these potential residences are going to be rental properties or they're going to be full-time residential properties. But how would you handle this, and who would control and monitor access and egress in the case of an evacuation, mandatory evacuation, which would have to come through Kilmarlock proper, West Side Lane? I don't know if people have given a lot of thought to this. Right now, there are no monitors. We don't even have a traffic light exiting from Kilmarlock proper out to 158. I have a lot of concerns with, I think fundamentally the plan is a plan, but I also look at perhaps impacting negatively on these adjoining Kilmarlock properties in the case of flooding. You're going to have boats in here, obviously. Every time we've had an incident down here, Pirates Cove is evacuated. These boats are going to have to go somewhere. They're going to have to be hauled out, or they have to be taken out. There are a lot of things that concern me with regard to the coastal application, the potential impact for extensive flooding back here. And I've just wondered, has any of this been considered in the overall project?
The answer is yes.
Yes? Yes, from what perspective?
Yeah, Warren, if you want to come.
We're going through a permit process with 10 state and 4 federal agencies. And so everything that we've designed and laid out takes into account not only the elevations of the water in the wetlands that are there, the large expanse of wetlands, but also in the adjoining sound waters. We're going to have a softened shoreline. We're going to have elevated buildings to meet all the flood ordinances. As far as some of the items, I'm not going to touch on everything you brought up because
Based
my point. But
since this is an amended plan, do you have to go through all the recertification for all this again?
It was never permitted through any of the state and federal agencies. We're at that point now.
Okay.
We're getting the county approval so that we can permit it through the state and federal agencies. And that includes the design and the other factors that would get at all the environmental
Seems like
issues.
you're putting the cart before the horse. What if you don't get the permitting you need?
This is a time for you to actually air your concerns, and then Mr. Warren, you can rebut afterwards. So we can't just go back and forth.
Oh, okay. No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Those are my concerns and questions looking at this relatively for the first time.
Okay.
And
again, I can understand the current residents of Kilmarlock having concerns about the traffic, because quite frankly, parts of that west side lane through the residential community, unless you have restricted sizes on boats and trailers and vehicles, they're going to have a tough time making that turn, especially if there's oncoming traffic. So I think there's more to this than meets the eye, and I just wondered if everyone's kind of looked at all the potential negative aspects. A lot of positives here also, but potentially I see some negatives.
All right.
That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Any other comments or concerns?
Are there any other people that want to speak?
Anybody else that wants to speak that hasn't already spoken? All right.
Close the public hearing.
We'll close the public hearing. Any discussion? Okay.
One thing that I see that is a positive factor is the fact that they have decreased the total amount of residential dwellings that will exist upon completion. Ms. Glave, am I correct in saying that West Side Lane is not currently state maintained?
It is
So currently it is state maintained
state maintained
now.
road, and DOT has approved the project through our technical review process.
So what that means to me by your statement there, to those folks who were talking about the road, it means that at the time your subdivision was created, they had to meet the requirements of NCDOT about road height, the pitch of the runoff, all of these other factors, the strength of the underlayment that's under the pavement, all these things that people who develop land have to go through now. So the road that exists now, West Side Lane, is state maintained, and if there is an issue with the road, it would be a matter that would be taken up with NCDOT and not a subdivision or this potential proposed subdivision.
That's correct.
Another item I'd like to talk about would be the conditions approved in 2008 likely need to be changed because of the lowering of the total number of residential dwellings that will exist upon completion. It was 237 total, now it would be 160 total. And those limitations that were there that existed before would be higher percentage-wise now than what was originally calculated. I think those need to be changed perhaps to 30 residential before they receive the certificate of occupancy, and perhaps 60, being no more than 60 residential dwelling units shall receive a certificate of occupancy prior to the marina, instead of it being 100. And perhaps no more than 100, that's in number 5 on page 83. No more than 100 residential dwellings shall receive a certificate of occupancy prior to the commercial components being approved and fully constructed. It seems logical to lower those items because the total number of residential units was lowered in this change, this proposed change.
And because this is a conditional zoning, the applicant would have to agree to the changes. They can, even if the applicant doesn't agree, we can send them to the board as.
Okay.
So would we just say, for ease of understanding, reduce the number by the same percentage as the original?
It's pretty close.
Okay.
To the percentage,
And
the 30 to 60. And
applicant,
100.
is that?
Can we have time to discuss that internally, and then you can put that?
Absolutely.
You'll have time before the commissioners.
Yeah,
We'll go ahead and
Still put that in now.
put it
Yes,
in there.
We'll
Yeah.
put it in and just say that the applicant's going to review the suggestion, and it would have to be agreed upon at the Board of Commissioners.
Certainly.
It just makes sense to lower it. There's no need to maintain those high expectations of what it was previously in 2008, since the proposed change is occurring now. And I absolutely understand the concerns of the existing residents of Kilmarlock. At any given time, anyone walking down the road has a potential hazard of being struck by a vehicle, or, I mean, many things could happen. regardless of whether this subdivision comes in or not. That fact still exists, so I guess the reality of it is if it does take 3 to 5 years for them to build out this subdivision, then that's much better as far as risk than it being constructed in 1 year. The likelihood is lower by having a longer duration of time for the build out than it is for a shorter duration of time. That's just logical to think of it in that respect.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I have one question, just because I'm not that familiar with the subdivision. West Side Lane go all the way down to a public pier now?
No,
It's just land back there now?
it goes to a private property.
Residences and lots back there.
We don't have they don't have a good map for us.
West Side Lane is
Yeah, there you
this. It runs through Kilmarlock, and then it stops at this private
That
property
property.
that we're talking about.
Okay, and the pier dock is going to be within the highlighted area?
Yes,
Okay, so it doesn't exist now?
correct.
And where is the golf course?
This is, wait, my mouse is not keeping up. This area that you're seeing that runs throughout the subdivision, this lighter
Okay.
color, is the
Okay.
golf course.
Thank you.
I also want to mention that I have a concern as well about how the county would monitor the transportation if some was given from the parking area back to the ramp area. How would the county count the number of golf carts available, or if they are available, or whatever type of transportation would exist at that time? How does the county monitor that, and how do we ensure that that exists during the hours of operation?
I would suggest that they provide us something in writing to say this is what we're proposing. If we think it's acceptable, if the commissioners think it's acceptable, we would take that proposal, and then we, as staff, would just do routine monitoring. If we received a complaint, we would certainly go out then, but we routinely monitor sites for compliance.
Would there be any teeth to that?
Yes, if it's made a condition in, as a part of the approval, absolutely.
Okay.
Does staff believe that a walkway, pedestrian areas is a more logical solution than having golf cart transportation available, even though it might be easier?
I mean, that, it's certainly acceptable either way.
I think it would be nicer to have and simplify stuff if they put in a ADA compliant walkway. Goes from
That's certainly acceptable.
Because I think other people besides the boat ramp users are going to be using the getting to the sound.
Right.
Any other discussion? Do I have a motion? Yeah.
I have one other question, Ms. Glade.
Okay.
Has the applicant mentioned that they would agree to having pedestrian walkways and additional signage to ensure pedestrian safety between these areas we're speaking about, as far as the parking area near the septic station?
I believe
and
they'd be
that-
fine with that. But I would defer to them.
Ms.
Warren?
Reedus?
Yeah, I believe that at the end of it, we're going to have a lot more pedestrian walkways. I mean, there's going to be a lot more access. There are areas where we're constricted by wetlands, and we're really trying to limit our impacts, so we may have like a wooden walkway in places, but, I mean, the public boat ramp requirement, something the county has put on the developer. They don't want to do that. We're willing to do a walkway.
There's a lot of maintenance involved with wooden objects.
We're willing to go along with that.
Some arm twisting.
That'll be there forever.
Just have to throw that in again.
Thanks.
Appreciate that input.
Ow.
All right, do I now have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve PB 0848 Cape Currituck. And the reasoning being, we understand absolutely all of the concerns. We've been given a detailed package that gives us all of this information that many of the residents have already spoken about. There appears to be objects in their way about their feelings of safety of pedestrians, which in fact are not the problem of the potential developer, but are perhaps the problem of the subdivision that exists itself, Kilmarlock. And I recommend that we change those items that I had already spoken about as far as the residential dwelling units on packet page 83 on 3, 4, and 5 to be 30, 60, and 60, being that the numbers were lowered of the total residential dwelling units.
30, 60, and 60, or 30, 60, and 100?
I think it was 36.
Did I say 100? I apologize, 30, 60, and 100.
Okay, thank you.
And that we also include a recommendation to have pedestrian pathways or walkways between the parking area and the boat ramp area, and additional signage to prevent pedestrian issues. This amended CD Plan Unit Development Zoning request is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the land use plan, is compatible with existing and proposed uses surrounding the land subject to the application, and is an appropriate zoning district and use for the land. And it is in the public interest.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's go ahead and take a short 5-minute break, as opposed to a long 5-minute break. For the record, that was the longest 5 minutes I think we've ever had. All right, let's go ahead with the PB 1823, the Foss track. I think right now we only have, let's see, is it Schwedler, Jamie? Is that how you say it, Schwedler? Schwedler. David, all right, and Mark. Okay. Is there anyone else signed up to speak for the Foss track? Okay. All right, so this one's Tammy's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, this is a request to rezone 228.83 acres from agricultural to planned development residential, and it is located in Moyock. And just to orient you, whoa. Okay, this is Ranch Land subdivision. This was previous Tidewater Auto Auction property. It may still be their property, but the project was not approved. Eagle Creek is over here. The property is zoned agricultural. And then you can see from the 2006 land use plan that it's designated as full service. This is the Moyock Small Area Plan that classifies the property as limited service. And I know it's small, but that is the proposed development that we're going to be talking about. The development includes 513 dwelling units with a mix of townhomes and conventional single-family homes. It also includes up to 22,000 square feet of residential serving commercial, and that would be located on the ground floor of some of your multifamily units, and those are in this area. The property would have approximately 85 acres of open space, and some of the recreational amenities would include a clubhouse, a recreational area, a multi-use path that traverses the site, and sidewalks on both sides of all streets with appropriate crossings at intersection. And then there's also a area in the back here that's designated for utilities, and that would be your wastewater treatment plant. Go ahead and get into the plan here. It's staff's opinion that the project is inconsistent with the land use plan. The policy emphasis is for Moyock is on properly managing the increase in your level of growth, and to make sure that that growth is in areas where it's intended to be. I won't read the policies to you. They're in your packet. Policy HN1 speaks to development at appropriate densities for the area. The adjoining subdivision of ranch land to the east has significantly lower density at 0.5 units per acre and larger lots at 1.44 acres than that's proposed. What is proposed is 2.25 units per acre and about a third of an acre lot size. There are buffers that are proposed, but there's still concern from staff that the densities are incompatible with the existing neighborhood. You'll see in your packet the applicant called out several neighborhoods that were recently approved in the Moyock area. And we would just like to note that those were north of here where growth is targeted, that we'll talk about in our small area plan too, but where growth is targeted for a higher density area. And those are typically where there's public sewer, public water. Public sewer will not be available to this project. That Tidewater Auto Auction property that we just discussed was recently denied connection to the wastewater treatment plant for the county. Policy dyslexia. NH1 speaks to not allowing development in special flood hazard areas. The property with the newly adopted flood maps actually came out of a flood zone, but there's recorded documentation of historic flooding at the front of that property. And the land use plans does speak to the CAMA objectives to not allow property in hazardous locations, not allow development in hazardous locations such as where flooding occurs. Staff has determined that the plan is inconsistent also with the Moyock Small Area Plan. And a small area plan is the land use plan is for the entire county. The small area plan dials it down to just a specific area and develops regulations for that. In 2013, the Board of Commissioners recognized the uniqueness of Moyock and the concerns of the area citizens. So they commissioned the Moyock Small Area Plan. to comprehensively review growth and development. That small area plan examines issues, concerns, and expectations specific to that Moyoc community. And it established public policies that work to accomplish the public's vision. That small area plan has policies that address growth, your sense of place, your quality of life, economic development that are very specific to Moyoc. That plan does classify the area as limited service, and with that limited service designation in the small area plan, the property would be allowed from 1 to 1.5 units per acre, and this project is coming in at 2.25 units per acre, which is over the allotted allowance in the small area plan. Some of the plan inconsistency policies, again, I won't read them all to you, but policy FLU1, that speaks to compatibility between existing and proposed development to avoid adverse impacts on your adjoining community. Those same findings with the comparison to ranch land as well as development north of this area. Policy CC1 speaks to encouraging development with a rural atmosphere and an appropriate transition areas from existing developments. And the small area plan does not allow developments at this density at this location. Staff agrees with the applicant that the map should not be the sole determining factor when you're reviewing a plan. It should be used in conjunction with the entire small area plan, and the map should not be weighted more heavily than the policies. Staff used the map to determine the future land use designation, which was limited service, and we used that designation to review the plan and determine the vision, policy, and actions for the subject area. So we reviewed the map and the plan as a whole. Policy B12, it encourages well-planned mixed-use developments that are specifically supported by the future land use map, which this project does not. Technical Review Committee recommended approval of the project because it's inconsistent with the land use plan. Actually, I can go with it.
Did you mean to say denial?
Denial, I'm sorry. Freudian slip there. Make sure I get all of these for you. TRC recommended denial of the plan because of its inconsistency with the land use plan, the Moyoc small area plan, and some of the review standards in the UDO. And if you look at your next section on page 156, consistency and reasonable statement, you'll see the consistency statement that says it's inconsistent with the following review standards of the UDO, and that's what that was referring to. It's not consistent with the goals and objectives and policies of the land use plan and other adopted county plans and the purpose of the ordinance. It's in conflict with provisions of the UDO. It is incompatible with existing and proposed uses surrounding the land. It adversely impacts nearby lands. It would not result in a logical or orderly development pattern. And it would result in development that is not adequately served by public facilities, and that does include sewer. It would not. It would conflict with the public interest and is not in harmony with the purpose and intent of the UDO. So it's staff's opinion that the request is not reasonable and not in the public's interest because it's in conflict with those plans and those policies that we stated. And just to add a little additional information, UNC School of Government is basically who we go to for land use opinions. They're the attorneys that kind of develop these languages and help develop the general statutes and such. Dave Owens is one resource that we use there, and he basically, to summarize what he said it's you can approve a plan that is in a development plan that's inconsistent with your land use plan and your small area plan, but he expressed that you should do so very, very carefully. And one of those reasons is the next section in your packet on page 157. There was a general statute adopted not too long ago that referenced if you approve a plan that is inconsistent with your CAMA land use plan, which is the overall land use plan, then you have automatically amended your land use plan. There's no application process to go through or anything like that. So if you say that you can allow this development even though it's inconsistent with those policies that we talked about in the land use plan, then that means that the next development would be allowed to proceed the same way, to develop that's inconsistent with your plans. So our changes would be that you can develop above the densities and the compatibility with the neighborhood, and that you would be allowed to develop in historically flooded areas. And that is all I have, but I will be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Yes.
Stephen
I have
has a question.
I'm not sure to whom I need to ask.
Okay.
On page 157, talks about this letter that we received from Mike Lopenzansky. When you are speaking about it changes the land use plan, are you meaning the proposed document that the Land Use Plan Steering Committee had worked on for the last 3 years, which has been submitted to certain agencies for review?
Not the small area plan. It would change the land use plan, not the small area plan.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm interpreting that law correctly.
And we're talking about the existing 2006 land use plan, not the updated revision that we've worked. It would update the 2006.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that it?
For now.
No.
For now.
For now. Yeah. Okay. Counselor, I imagine you're here to address the policy inconsistencies. So I think I'd probably like to hear from you first.
Well, we prepared a PowerPoint, and Mr. Bissell has prepared the facts.
Sure. Sure.
Start, I'll finish, and then I know David would like to speak as well, so I don't know if we need to divide.
Mr. Bissell, come on down.
Start the clock.
We start the clock as soon as you touch the podium.
Oh, okay.
That was good.
Okay.
Watch him not touch it.
Ready, go.
Make sure I know how to drive this thing before you start the clock. All right, so let's see. That's going the wrong way.
Yeah, it's that arrow.
And then there's a pointer here. Is that the middle one? Yeah, there we go. Can you see that?
No.
Technology.
You'd have to remember. You'd have to step around if you're wanting to highlight.
Right.
Yeah, we're on to the book
Yeah,
now.
use the laser.
Yeah, we're on to the
You'd have
book.
step around.
Pull out your book.
Yeah, that book that you have in your packets.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think one thing that everybody could agree on is that the Foss tract is going to be developed at some point by somebody. And so given that the land will be developed, can it be developed in a way that provides a significant public benefit to the community and particularly to the residents who live nearby? What does the land look like today, and are there things that can be done to make it better? So we started studying the land, and one of the things we kept hearing was that there are drainage problems in the area, and so we have performed an analysis of the Rolling Creek drainage area. Kind of an overview of the points we're going to touch on are drainage, utilities, density, the character of the development, compatibility, those kinds of things. But the one that we're going to talk about first, because we heard it so often, was drainage. So I'm going to first present the results of this analysis that we did of the Rolling Creek drainage area. These are the things that we did, and as part of that activity, we prepared a map that shows the drainage areas, and we compiled the FEMA data and the topographic information in the area. We did an actual field survey of cross-sections and elevations of the main drainage courses through Rolling Creek and the tributaries. We did a field visit to photograph and document and make sure we knew what the data was that we were looking at from the field survey. We did a second visit, and this one was actually with Will Creve to take a closer look at ranch land itself and are there things that can be done to improve drainage in ranch land. And this is kind of an overview of this part of the Rolling Creek drainage area, and I'm going to step over here for just a second, if you don't mind, just to be able to use the pointer. This is Eagle Creek here, which Rolling Creek runs through. This is the outlet under 168, and then along Guinea Road, where it's kind of free-flowing in here. These are some points along the way where we took a number of photographs that kind of representative areas of the condition of that drainage system. And I'm going to go through a few of those. This is kind of what it looks like downstream. Looking from 168, you can see it's pretty free-flowing there. Upstream, you have Eagle Creek, where improvements have been done. This is actually their pump station that is at their property line, headed in the direction of this property. But as you come downstream, this is what you find on the actual Foss property itself, where there's a lot of vegetation and growth and siltation and so forth. A little farther down, you find these kinds of obstructions. This is the area along the common property line between the Foss property and the auto auction site, where you can see that there's a huge amount of siltation that's occurred from that farmland. This is the common line between the Foss property and the auto auction site where the ranch land outlet drains into. And ranch land and this is the area that drains from ranch land toward Rolling Creek. And then as you go farther southwest, this is the common line between ranch land itself and the Foss property, and you see there's really not much there to work with. There's no easements in place. There's really not much in the way of a formal drainage system. So just kind of summarizing those observations, there's a lot of siltation and debris. There's a lot of impediments to flow. The ranch land outlet is overgrown and in generally poor condition. there really actually isn't a drainage outlet available southwest of the Dominion Power on this property, and the only one on ranch land on that side is some pipes that come from Guinea Mill Canal that have no backflow preventers, and so when Guinea Mill is overloaded, the water actually flows up into the subdivision. Also, on the other side of 168, there's a drainage outlet that needs some maintenance. This is the area that drains over to Guinea Road. And just kind of looking at this, this is kind of hard to read. There's one in your packet that's easier to read, but this shows you the elevation data, which shows some high and low areas in between. There's some pipes that are kind of restrictive. There's an elevation in the middle that's about 2.5 feet higher than it ought to be on Rolling Creek. So there are definitely some things that can be done to improve the situation. Within ranchland itself, we looked at the area that connects or that adjoins this property, and we've kind of estimated with these improvements that we're talking about, improving or putting a new ditch along the common property line and cleaning it out downstream, the areas that can have a positive impact. And the area you see in green there would have a direct positive impact. The area that you see in yellow, we're estimating, would have a more indirect impact. But what happens is Guinea Mill floods way before Rolling Creek does, and so if we solve the problem in the Rolling Creek direction, then there's a better way for that flooding to be relieved in the direction of Rolling, which would positively impact the area in yellow. So based on that, the developer has offered some commitments, which would be to clean this, again, subject to obtaining the right of entry where necessary on some of these properties, would clean out the Rolling Canal from Eagle Creek to the Foss property line, would lower or remove existing culverts on the Foss property, would clean out Rolling Creek and lay it back at a 3-to-1 side slope, and deepen it as necessary within the Foss property, improve the ranch land out at a long Foss property in the auto auction site, and then construct a new ditch southwest of the power easement. And these are just kind of preliminary cross sections of how these ditches can be improved to provide much better drainage in the area. Additional commitments, a commitment to improve the ditch on the other side of 168 to clear and snag as necessary downstream. And then within the development itself, there was discussion about potential flooding. You know, the lower areas are in front, we're along the highway, and that's where we're proposing stormwater ponds. So we would model the stormwater from this development for not only the 10-year but the 100-year storm to show how drainage from that 100-year storm would be managed. And then also, you know, this would not be a one-time deal. We would form a maintenance association and provide a funding mechanism for the ongoing operation and maintenance of these drainage improvements. So this would be an ongoing improvement. This just kind of schematically is how that would work, where you see the stormwater pond adjacent to a property line, that the site would be built up to flow to that pond, and then a berm constructed between the property line ditch. And let me make sure you follow it. This is the property line ditch constructed along the ranch land property line, be deepened and improved, and then there would be a berm constructed between the stormwater management system and that property line ditch, so that this development is not impacting ranch land's ability to drain through the improved system that we're proposing. So the areas that are shown in blue are the main drains that would be improved. And then let me just kind of take you through the development master plan itself. And this is the goal. You know, we want to build a community that has a creative design, provides a mix of different residential uses in close proximity to one another, while at the same time providing an efficient use of open space that promotes an active lifestyle and a strong sense of community. Limited small-scale commercial uses are being proposed primarily to serve the needs of the residents in the development. And this is consistent with the PRD zoning district. This is what the master plan for the site looks like. I'll take you on a quick tour. As you come into the development, you'll have development set back a good distance from the highway with a nicely landscaped entrance feature, followed by fountains in the proposed ponds. And as you come in, then on the right, you'll see a multifamily section here on the right. That would be a very attractive feature. As you come in a little farther, we have a townhome development proposed, and these are rear-loaded townhomes, so you're not going to have driveways and garages. You're going to have a nice streetscape with walkways and street lights and so forth. And as you come a little farther, some of these first floors would have neighborhood commercial on the ground level that would look something like this. And then as you come in a little farther, we're getting into the detached sections where this is a traditional neighborhood development style, which also has drives and garages in the rears, front porches, accessing sidewalks, really a real pedestrian-friendly community. And you have a streetscape that will look something like this in those areas. And as you come farther back, then more traditional single-family detached dwellings. We have a nice clubhouse proposed with community gathering, indoor and outdoor recreation areas proposed. So the objectives are to create a mix of compatible housing types to make it pedestrian-friendly with greenways and open spaces, to connect everything with multi-use paths, to offer a mixture of different residential types, sizes, densities. We're going to be sensitive to the wetlands. We're providing a 13.5 roughly acre site for wastewater disposal, and we're going above and beyond on the stormwater management. We're designing the streets to be in accordance with the North Carolina DOT Complete Streets Policy Manual. These are just a couple of examples of what they recommend. This is the kind
Excuse me, Mark. Cherie, what's the time?
We have 5 minutes and 30 seconds left.
5 minutes left. Well, I guess I better wrap it up. This is an interesting map. The areas in yellow here are, let me start with the areas in pink. Those are existing commercial zoning. Then this is our site here. You can see that around it there are large areas of commercial zoning. There's the 100-acre auto site, 250 acres roughly due north, and then a little bit farther north is Moyock Commons and some other commercial area. The areas in yellow are actual development that has been approved. There's other residential zoning, but this is actual development that has either been developed or approved for development on this side of Moyock. So you can see that the Foss Track is really right in the middle of other large developments on this side of Moyock. You've got 588 units between Eagle Creek and Lakeview, and 275 is the ranch land, and then 426 due north. So you can see that the location really appears to be appropriate based on existing development patterns. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie Schwedler, who is a land use attorney, to address the consistency.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to clean off the clicker, not because I don't like Mark, but I know he's under the weather. If it may please the chair, if we could have the 5 minutes that we would normally have for rebuttal added on for Mr. Shepard to be able to speak.
I'm going to defer to the next applicant and ask if they can have some extra time for this one.
We'll try to be as brief as we...
To accommodate both you and Mr. Shepard, we'll say 10 extra minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jamie Schwedler. I'm at 301 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm with Parker Poe. I'm a land use attorney who regularly deals with these types of rezonings, and I'm here to talk mainly about the consistency issues that were brought up in the staff report and in our statement. Now, we provided a list of a comprehensive list of consistency policies, and that's in your packet at item 3DF. I won't go and recite all of those policies just as Ms. Glave kind of highlighted them, but I would like to provide a very brief overview of 4 areas where our proposal is not only consistent with the land use plan, but goes above and beyond to offer something that is absolutely in the public interest of the citizens of Currituck County. And I'll start with density. This is located within the full service area of the land use plan. Now, as Ms. Glave said, the land use plan refers to the 2006 land use plan that is the CAMA approved land use plan for Currituck County. And that plan designates density at above 2 dwellings per acre. So at 2.25, we're just above that density, completely consistent with that density that's been identified with the county since 2006. So we're consistent in densities for policy AG6, HN1, and HN3. Now, with respect to the inconsistency mentioned in the location of the densities, it's true we're in a different density than our adjacent residential subdivisions to the east and the west. But the land use plan full service area really focuses on where in the county do you want to see these densities. And in 2006, the county determined that this was an appropriate place for densities of over 2 dwelling units per acre. In terms of utilities, Mark went over a great summary of what we're offering to do for this property. Not only are we going in and looking at what the current stormwater issues are on the site, but we're looking at how we can improve those, how we can make not only the future residents at this location have a better quality of life and stormwater drainage, but we're fixing the problem that exists today for Eagle Creek and for Ranchland by removing those obstructions and by putting a mechanism in place that would make sure those obstructions continue to be cleared out and moved. And I would submit that any flooding that's on the site today or that's experienced today is a result of there being not that plan in place, and that this would provide the type of extra measures to keep that stormwater moving. I'd also like to highlight with the wastewater, again, this area would not be perhaps eligible for county sewer, but we are committed to providing an area to do a private sewer system or potentially connect in with another private sewer system, and are in active discussions with the neighbors to make sure that we're doing something that's consistent with what's on the ground today. That's consistent with the policies on utilities that I've listed here in the slide. Again, 3 additional consistency policies on the utilities. As far as recreation and open space, you heard Mark talk about how there'll be new pockets of open space that don't exist today, that don't exist in places like Ranchland that were developed at perhaps a lower density, but don't have this open space. And to get that type of open space, we need to have a little bit more density in other areas. And so that's where you'll see in the master plan pockets of open space and pockets of a little bit more density to have an overall density of 2.25, again, just above the density recommended in the 2006 plan. We provided, in connection with that, open space bikeways, greenways, pedestrian connectivity. You heard citizens talk about how important that is to them. We've done that here, and that's consistent with the 3 policies that you see on your screen here. Transportation infrastructure, we're going to be providing paved roadways and convenient circulation. That's consistent with these additional 4 policies. So each of these policies are in addition to the ones that we've listed before. We're now at about 12 policies that we found consistent. And it's also consistent with the MOYOC area policy emphasis of the land use plan. This focuses on several different areas where you're focusing on clustered housing developments, providing a variety of housing product, providing densities that could be medium to high. And it also suggests that even though in the MOYOC small area plan we're at a limited services area, the higher density from 3 to 4 units per acre could be considered if the factors were right. Well, the factors are right with this proposal. We're proposing to do something that is better than connecting to county sewer and not doing anything else. We're improving the sewer, we're improving the stormwater conditions, and we're doing it in a way that's consistent with the plans. And as I reiterated before, it's consistent with the future land use map and the density. It's also consistent with 4 different policies in the MOYOC small area plan, and I've listed them here. It would include complete streets. It would be designed to have an interconnected multimodal transportation network. The cost of infrastructure, facilities, and services will be borne by those creating the demand. We're stepping up and affirmatively doing a program that not many people are doing today. And stormwater runoff and soil erosion sedimentation is properly managed under that program. It's also consistent with these 3 policies that are listed in the small area plan. Again, those are in detail in the back of your packet. And it's consistent with the applicable provisions of the Unified Development Ordinances. Now, this is why a unified look at all of these things is important, because the staff report has focused really on the inconsistencies with the land use plan and the small area plan, but there's actually 11 or 12 different factors that the board is called on to look at. And in the TRC recommendation, they found inconsistent with all of them. Well, I've just listed you 15 different policies that we're consistent with. None of those are mentioned in the staff report. None of them are evaluated in any kind of detail to let you do the job you need to do to weigh the consistencies and what's in the public interest. So we submit that those should be taken into account in addition to those remaining factors in 2.3.4C. And those are listed here. They're also in the back of your packet. The other areas of compliance in 2.4.3C are that it positively impacts nearby lands. We're affirmatively doing something about the stormwater that would not be done today but for this type of development. It will result in a logically and orderly development pattern because it's located along a major transportation thoroughfare. It would not result in significant adverse impacts on the natural environment because, we're affirmatively doing something about that. And it would not conflict with the public interest or result in a development that's inadequately served by public utilities. And so this gets to the purpose of the consistency law. This law was passed so that boards like yourself could do a comprehensive analysis, not weighted or selective or cherry-picked, but really looking at all of the policies that the county has focused on through the years and figuring out how the plan measures up to them. So the law was not designed to say you're inconsistent with one policy, you're absolutely denied. It was a weighing, and that's something that David Owens, who Ms. Glave mentioned, really focuses on in his 2011 blog post. He says that no one type of plan is absolutely determinative, and there should be a weighing of all of these policies. And that's the staff's role, is to advise the planning body of what those policies are, and that's the purpose of the county's own regulations, to say, here are all these factors to be considered. Let's give them a really thorough look and figure out which are consistent and inconsistent.
Ms. Schwadler?
Yes.
Can I interrupt you just a moment?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, according to our planning board rules and procedures, no planning board meeting shall extend past 10 p.m. If the board wishes to hear items past 10 p.m., we must have a majority vote of the board to continue in 15-minute intervals.
Well, I didn't even look at the clock. We'll go ahead and take a motion. Do we want to extend for another 15 minutes? Do we need to? We just need to address it every 15 minutes. Okay.
Or if you want to say 30 minutes, perhaps.
Let's go 30 minutes because I know we've got some stuff with both applicants. So, anyone opposed? No. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Craddock.
Let me make a formal motion.
Oh, is that? Okay, let's do it that
Let me
way.
make a formal motion
Sure.
to extend the meeting by 30 minutes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
Sorry,
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr. Craddock.
Whaley.
And thank you. And so that just
Keeps
gives
me
us-
straight.
Gets us to the legal standard that the board is called upon to follow today. I'm glad Ms. Glaive brought up Mr. Owens because he is a very well-respected land use professor, and his 2011 article was right on point, that these plans are advisory in nature, they should be considered and properly weighed, and the board should weigh all those factors. But he also came out with a more recent December 5th blog post of this year, and that publication provides a little bit more clarity, and he has some statements that go right to the heart of the issue. And he refers back to a November 2018 bulletin, where he says the plan is advisory and provides information to be considered when zoning amendments are proposed, but does not dictate what that decision must be. The plan is advisory only. And he has an important exception. And that exception is that there is a mandated consistency with CAMA-approved plans. And as Ms. Glaive stated, the 2006 land use plan is that CAMA-approved plan in Currituck County. And what does that plan say? It says that density at 2 acres or above is appropriate for this full-service area. And so under Mr. Owens' guidance, the consistency with the land use plan of 2006 that holds the density of 2 units per acre actually controls in this situation. And because we are consistent with that density and we're consistent with those 15 policies that I listed at the beginning of this presentation, the board should take that into account and seriously weigh the consistency against those 2 policies that were in the staff report that dealt with density and whether the density in adjacent neighborhoods was appropriate. And for those reasons, we'd just like to conclude that the plans are advisory only. They do not dictate what this board must do. The board must weigh all of the policies, not only listed in the staff report, but that were offered by the applicant, except the policies that are in the CAMA plan. And here, the CAMA plan is absolutely consistent with this proposed rezoning. Not only are we consistent in the density, but we've gone above and beyond in terms of stormwater, utilities, infrastructure, and the board has ample reasons to find that we're consistent with the land use plan and in the public interest sufficient to approve this rezoning, and that's what we would like for you to recommend tonight. I'd like to reserve the rest of the time for Mr. Shepherd, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excuse me, have a minute here. My name's David Shepherd, and I live at 173 St. Andrews Road in Eagle Creek. Since I've moved there, drainage in the neighborhood has been bad and gotten worse in recent years. The problem reached a breaking point after the recent storms of the last 4 or 5 years. Money was budgeted by the HOA to resolve the problem, and in the last 3 years, we've dug out approximately 1/2 of Western Canal on our western boundary, completed excavation of over 2 miles of internal ditches, and are continuing to make further improvements. Through it all, we've consulted with the county, with Eric Weatherly, the county engineer, and Will Creef, the soil and water technician, and have been commended on our efforts. All the water leaving Eagle Creek either goes into Guinea Mill Run Canal or Roland Canal. Guinea Mill Run Canal is encompassed by a drainage district, and we have not had problems with that. Roland Canal is another issue, and I'm going to run out of time. But bottom line, if this development is approved and the conditions are met that they're saying they'll meet, in digging out Roland Canal, they'll mean that the $40,000 that we've spent internally to move water out of our subdivision will have some place to go. If Roland Canal isn't cleaned, the water doesn't pass out of our subdivision. Excuse me, losing my voice. And all of the things that we've done won't help us. We have had flooding in homes. Our sewage system has failed several times because of the water that's risen in the community. What we've done is mitigated that, but as the silting continues in Roland Canal downstream, and if it's not mitigated, the water will back up across into Eagle Creek, and all of our efforts will be naught. Sorry, over my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Are there any questions for any of the 3 applicants? All right.
Mr. Chairman, may I have just a minute or to summarize?
Sure, if it's just a minute, sure.
few other comments to make, but I'm just going to focus in on one thing, which is on which we didn't get to discuss, which is the term sheet that's in your packet, which starts on page 12, and that lists terms and conditions that the developer is committing to in connection with this approval, having to do with the way the property is being developed and commitments regarding utilities, regarding these drainage improvements, which refer to all of those commitments that I outlined early in the presentation regarding drainage, regarding transportation, regarding phasing over a period of 10 to 15 years, regarding fire protection, regarding environmental protection and monitoring, and we just think that this is going to do exactly what the PDR ordinance was designed for. And I think it's going to provide residential housing choices, affordability, and diversity, and place for safe and efficient both vehicular and pedestrian and bicycle traffic and circulation friendly neighborhoods. So we would ask for your support.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
Anyone opposed?
Hmm?
Was anyone opposed?
To the 30 minutes? No.
No, I mean, any people in the audience?
Oh, no,
speaking
no one
in
else signed
opposition?
up. Nope.
I have a question for you, Ms. Glade, or Ms. LaCicero. Do we happen to have the ability to see an overlay of the Moyock small area plan over the subject property we're speaking about tonight? To see where that boundary exists.
Oh.
Quicker.
It's clicking too fast.
It's the yellow.
Is that what we're looking at?
Can you point to us the boundary line of the Moyock small area?
It exceeds this,
Oh, it exceeds the
yeah, this slide.
width of that? Okay.
Yeah, it goes way down.
What's the letter coding? I mean, the R, C, and
R
L.
is rural, C is conservation, L is limited, and F is full.
If I can make a comment, I was the chairman of the Moyock Small Area Planning Committee, and when we when we put the plan together, one of the questions that we had was the plan that we were making, was it based on current infrastructure or potential future infrastructure? And the answer we got was that it was based on current infrastructure, and that the plan was supposed to be a guideline and not to be adhered to as a black and white document. So when I asked this question, so if they're building their own wastewater treatment plant, that changes the infrastructure. And so I would defer back to the land use plan rather than the Moyock Small Area Plan, and I would say that it would be in compliance to what the ideas of what we were trying to do for the Moyock Small Area Plan.
It appears that there are some differences between what the Land Use Plan 2006 version has as far as densities versus the small area plan densities, they are differing. Am I correct?
That's correct.
On page 155 of our package, in that first section below the blue area, it says promote compatibility between new development and existing development to avoid adverse impacts to the existing community. Can you tell me what would be the definition of an adverse impact?
Is approving something that is potentially not compatible with what is existing. Is one facet of that.
I look at this like, and not to disagree with staff, but we have an issue in both Ranchland and in Eagle Creek with flooding. And it's been an issue for years, decades, and in Ranchland at least, 10 years at least in Eagle Creek. And if nothing is done, our flooding will continue to get worse in both Ranchland and Eagle Creek. But this seems to be, set aside the density, the fact that they're willing to go through and resolve some of the drainage issues in both Eagle Creek and Ranchland. Basically, the canal on the Ranchland boundary is really non-existent. I've walked that a few times, and if you improve that drainage there, you improve the drainage along the northern side of the property, or yes, might be northwest. You improve the drainage from Eagle Creek. I don't see that as an adverse impact. I see that as a positive impact for both communities.
My only comment would be to make the drainage improvements that they're saying they're going to make. You would have to have all of the property owners that border that, all the property owners in ranch land give permission to improve that ditch, as well as they would not be, it's my understanding that this property owner is not allowing them to cross either, so I'm not sure how that would affect any
That's
of the
just through the one property that is directly behind the dam at Eagle Creek. You're right, but further up, if you walk past that property, it's pretty bad up and through there as well. So increasing the amount of water flow out of Eagle Creek would drastically improve our drainage. And as far as the ranchland side, now, Mr. Bissell, I don't remember if, I know we went over this and we looked at your plan, but were you talking about digging the entirety of the ditch on your property, or, yes? So we wouldn't have to get permission from, right. So no easements would be required.
And then the ditch that borders the Foss property with the auto auction site, we believe we can get an easement to lay that back on both sides.
Does that answer that question about the easements, or no? Or permission from property owners, I guess?
without having the permission from the property owner, I would not feel comfortable saying that they could get permission from the property owner to make those improvements. I mean, if they're
For
putting an
the auto auction section, yeah. What if we make that a condition of approval, that they need to get permission from an easement from the property owner?
I don't know how you can force somebody to give them permission.
No, I'm saying making that a condition for these guys. They have to obtain permission before it gets approved.
That's certainly up to the board.
Sir?
We can clean it out without permission on our side.
And clean up half.
Do a better job of it if we can get permission on the other side.
So even without their permission, you could lay it back further on your side?
Half. They can clean out half of the ditch to their side.
Can you create a larger ditch using your property? Okay. So even if they say no, you can still improve the ditch?
Provide the hydraulic capacity.
I got to tell you, that's a huge concern, and Mr. Shepherd will tell you, in both of the communities, I met with the pastor over at the church in Ranchland. I met with several people that live in the section that floods right along that supposed canal that doesn't exist, and their houses and their yards flood constantly, even with a 4 or 5 inch rain, and I haven't met anyone yet that would be opposed to it. They're all in favor of it. I've been to both of the community meetings. There were some concerns about schools, traffic, and highway safety and lights, but no real concerns about anything else, the density or anything else in that community.
Mrs. Glade, when it comes to densities of some of the surrounding subdivisions compared to the proposed subdivision we're speaking about, to the ranch land appears to be the larger with the least density size lots. Eagle Creek appears to be slightly larger than the subject properties lots they're proposing, and their densities are less than the densities requested in this. Is that correct?
Which densities are less than?
The subject property's
Those-
density is greater than Eagle Creek's density.
Yes.
And greater than Ranchland's density.
Yes,
And lot sizes are larger for the Ranchland property versus Eagle Creek or this proposed subdivision.
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Am I correct in interpreting that as Ranchland is the older development done when benchmarks were a well and a septic tank requires a bigger lot?
Yeah.
City water gives you higher density, then city water and city sewer or municipal sewer gives you even more density. And I think that's where we're at in the comparison of surrounding developments and why you have what you have in variations. And I think it's very compatible with surrounding developments.
And my only comment to that, like Ranchland was developed before the small area plan was developed.
It was also developed before city water or city sewer.
Or county water and sewer, you're right.
Yeah. That's all right, Mark. Any other questions or concerns?
They're committing to connecting to a sewage treatment.
Building their own
Building their
within
own
the community.
plant.
13 acres, you said? Does that include the field?
I see that they're offering to be some very good neighbors by cleaning out the ditches. I think it's compatible with the surrounding approved developments that are across the road on both sides, up the road, down the road. I don't know how this compares to density in the mega site, which is just a few miles away.
Where growth is targeted, you're absolutely right.
I think it's irresponsible to expect that the only growth in Moyoc is going to be in the mega site.
I don't think we're saying that.
High density.
Yeah,
I think that's an irresponsible action to other landowners in the county or in Moyoc.
And I don't think staff is saying that the only development of high intensity can go in the mega site. It can go in the areas of Moyoc that are targeted for growth.
And that's used as a guideline, and I think they have followed the guideline.
Ms. Glade, could you tell us approximately how far the boundary of this property is from the area of the targeted growth in Moyoc?
It's less than 2 miles. It's
About 1.75 miles.
That high orange on the map that borders this property is full service, and that's high density growth.
It's true.
Bordering the property.
Yeah, what limited service is generally your transition zone from your full service to your rural.
But you're starting at full service and you're expanding the full service area.
No, they're not requesting to amend the map to
I know, but it
establish
would
a
automatically
full-service
do it.
area. And it would not automatically amend the Moyoc small area
It
plan.
would automatically amend the land use plan.
Right.
Ms. Glade, would you say that the Eagle Creek subdivision is a transition between one area and another?
The Eagle Creek is in the limited service as well. So you can consider that the transition from the full service down to the, this color is the rural area.
Would you also make the same statement for the ranch land subdivision?
Yes.
That is a transition as
Transition
well.
between full and rural, yes.
So in reality, you're looking at you know what the boundary is on the, was that the western side? That tiny little sliver at the bottom where you're going to be putting the wastewater treatment plant? You know what the length of that boundary is down at the bottom?
Down here,
Yes, I'm sorry.
I can come out or you can, Lori's got it pulled
Bart,
up on GIS.
do you know? No, I'm saying the length of that border.
The length of the western border.
Lori's pulling it up right now.
Even before you go into that, my point is, you've got an entire, I couldn't tell you how long that is in Eagle Creek. You've got that limited area in between the rural, and then you've got all of ranch land in between there. And really what you're talking about here is just a tiny sliver of property, which is going to be wooded, and there's going to be a wastewater treatment plant there. So really, the full service part's really only going to be at near the 168 corridor. Is that correct? So the rest of it is basically limited anyway. And if you're talking about a buffer between a rural area and a limited area, or a rural area and a full area, and you're just talking about that little sliver of property right there, it seems like that would act as a buffer.
You lost
Or
me.
a transition, rather. Am I wrong? Or?
Oh, you're right. Ms. Glade, by any stretch of the imagination, would an approval of this be considered spot zoning?
I won't say definitely no. I'm not an attorney, but I would not think that this would be considered spot zoning. It's of ample size and
It appears to me that the surrounding properties that are subdivisions are similar in nature to the proposed subdivision. Yes, there are different in ways on lot sizes, density, and some other factors, poor drainage and the expectation of good drainage on this particular subdivision. But it doesn't seem like that is an outlier if this were to be constructed. It seems very similar, that it would be compatible with the surrounding properties, compatible with the area in which it's located, and it does not appear that it would have a negative impact on other surrounding properties. As a matter of fact, it may actually increase the ability of adjacent landowners between Eagle Creek and this proposed subdivision to do more as well and to be compatible as well.
I agree. Any more discussion?
Good.
All right, do I have a motion?
Balance have anything?
you might want to hear from the public before you.
Oh, I thought we heard from everybody.
I'm sorry.
We'll open it to, I thought we closed public. Open to the public?
I didn't know if there was someone here to speak.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in opposition?
Anyone in opposition? Nope. All right. Do I have a motion?
Did you want to do that one?
No, you go right ahead.
I'm new, so I have no clue.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve PB 1823 false track rezoning of 228.83 acres from agricultural to planned development residential, because it is consistent with following review standards from section 2.4.3C of the UDO. It is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the land use plan, other applicable county adopted plans, and the purpose of the ordinance. It is not in conflict with the ordinance. It is compatible with existing and proposed uses surrounding the land subject to the application and is appropriate zoning district and uses for the land. It does not appear that it would impact adversely nearby lands, and as a matter of fact, it may improve drainage and other factors for adjacent landowners. It would result in a logical and orderly development pattern because it is similar in nature to other subdivisions that have already been approved and are occupied currently or in development. And this would not be in conflict with the public interest, and this proposal is in harmony with the purposes and intent of this ordinance.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second it.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion carries. Before you guys leave, I want to thank staff. It's a difficult thing for us as board members to disagree with staff because they do such a marvelous job putting these packages together, doing the research, and sometimes it's just a difference of opinion. We see things differently, and sometimes we disagree. But I want to thank you guys for everything you do, all your hard work. It really is hard for us to disagree with your recommendations.
Every meeting.
Yeah, every meeting, not just this. So thank you guys very much. We're going to go ahead and take another vote. Do I have a motion to extend for another 30 minutes?
No.
I'll motion that we extend for another 30 minutes.
Do we have a second? We have one more.
Well, we have
case.
two other items,
more
but
item.
Two more after this.
I don't know that the next one's going to be that.
Two more after this?
Well, there's two more items.
two more
after this.
total. One is a little small text amendment.
And
They won't take the whole 30 minutes, I don't think.
It's a long drive home.
Yeah, it
And
is.
there's 2 out of 5 of us that have a long drive home.
Yes.
I think we at least need to do University Park.
Yeah.
I do believe.
the other one is going to be probably 5
Let's
minutes.
do University Park real quick.
If you,
'cause
if you
it's
feel
just,
like it. Otherwise, these folks have to come back out.
yeah, they've been
another
waiting.
time.
Okay, yeah.
so maybe extend it for another half an hour.
Yeah. So do I have a motion to extend for? No, but we got to,
Yeah.
do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to extend. Is that okay with you, Anna?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to extend our hours for another 30 minutes without interruption.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Who's presenting?
That would be me.
All right, go ahead. Let's roll.
So that would be.
So what you said about staff, it's all on Tammy this time. She did.
I looked at my retirement app earlier. This is a land use plan amendment. I don't know that any sitting board member tonight has gone through this process. I know no sitting staff member has gone through this process. So Kama has been incredibly helpful. This is Elan Vacations University Park to orient you that the Elan Vacation Buildings is here, and then the back are those multifamily units that you see. The property is zoned PDM. The land use plan classifies this as limited service. Yes, limited service. And the applicant did much better maps than I'm able to draw, but let me show you a couple of his maps. This shows the area. We're not amending the actual plan itself, but requesting to amend the map within the plan. And that would be the area shown in yellow is the applicant's property. The existing full-service area is to the north here. There's one more map I want to look at. Okay, that's all right. When University Park was first approved, their ultimate goal was to put 39 additional multifamily units on this phase. That would be a mirror to the phase here that has the existing units. There is, in the process, you've heard us talk about the Imagine Currituck, which is the new land use plan for the county. That is in the process of being reviewed by state agencies and all that have to approve that. That plan does, in fact, afford the density that the applicant is asking for. The plan hasn't been approved yet. The applicant's ready to move forward. So what they're requesting is to go ahead and amend that section to full service that will match the to-be adopted plan, we'll call it. Generally, it's good planning practice to have a continuous service district, so it would be full service all the way down. It's not that big of a concern for staff since we know that this is supported in the plan that's being reviewed now and getting ready to be adopted. Let's see here. Once, if the board approves the land use plan amendment or the map amendment, it will go to the Board of Commissioners. The Board of Commissioners, if they approve it, they don't have the ultimate say, and this is the only particular case that you'll hear like this. It actually goes to CAMA, Coastal Area Management, and Coastal Resources Commission, CRC. There's an abbreviated review now for CRC, but they're still a part of it. So there's more steps than just what you would see with a normal case for it to be approved. I am not going to read this to y'all at
Please
almost
don't.
11 o'clock at night.
Please don't.
But on page 189, you'll see the applicant's statement for justification for the request. And their statement of how the land use plan amendment would advance public health, safety, general welfare. I'm going to summarize some of it. There is a demonstrated community need for the amendment. It's my understanding that the units there's a waiting list for the units. They're more affordable and in a location in the county where growth is desired in that newer plan. So staff does recommend approval. Since the newer plan soon to be adopted supports it. And since the policy emphasis for the sub-area plan, the policy emphasis for the Point Harbor sub-area is to allow this area to continue to evolve as a full-service community. This is a rendering of what would be these two units, and then these units would be this phase. Just a side note, it's not really even a point of discussion at this phase. We're looking at the land use plan. We're not looking at this development plan specific. Connection to West Mobile Road was called out, and that was prohibited by the Board of Commissioners at the last plan. That'll be addressed when they come back to them in their master plan, their subdivision plan, and their terms and conditions documents. But I did want to share with you that connection was there. The units will look, I would assume, identical to the ones that are there now. And this is an elevation showing what those look like. And staff does recommend approval as presented. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions for staff?
Yeah. Ms. Glave,
Yes.
what is the likelihood of CAMA and the other entity rejecting their proposal?
Good question. I asked that very specific question. Her name is Charlene Owens, who is our district representative. And she said that if the planning board, and specifically the board of commissioners, support the request, and we put in good justifications, I mean, it's hard to say bad justifications, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Valid, I should say valid
There you go.
justifications. They typically follow
Okay.
the recommendation.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
All right. So the applicant, I lost my list. Come on up, sir.
My name's Brian Sewell, House Engineering.
Brian, if I could ask you if you have anything to add to the staff's comments, just be as brief as possible.
I'll be brief and attempt to be thorough as well.
Okay.
First, I want to thank staff. This is a unique process. None of us have been through it, and they were a tremendous help.
They're a guinea pig. We
Yeah.
even had to create an application together. We didn't have one.
And I want to go to a suggestion, Mr. Chairman, that you said a few hours ago about getting the community involved early. Let them know how did it feel. Get the pulse of the community. So we did have a community meeting, and we went through their concerns, and they were based on people who live in that community. So their biggest concern was really looking at traffic going on the West Mobile Road, stormwater, how it affects their property. And we want to make sure that everyone knows that this is the first step in the process. There will be a lot of opportunity for feedback and people to get together and talk about this, but we want to make the community assured that through the process, through the county, through the state permitting, through all that, everything we do from stormwater to septic will be done properly with the right permits. And if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
I have no questions.
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had one person signed up to speak, Emmett McMillan. I don't know. It just says, are you Emmett?
Yeah.
Okay.
Emmett McMillan. I own the property at 164 West Mobile Road. I am the largest property owner that abuts the University Park project. I'm not against development, but I am against it affecting other properties. When this project started, I come to commissioners meeting. I address my concerns. We have livestock. You know, I was very concerned about that. That's why the buffer went from 10 feet to 25 feet, an undisturbed buffer. Ben Woody sat right there and said, you know, I watched the video last night. You know, and that's where this all started. And I don't want to fight with these people, but I read on the application. Oh, wait, I should back up. Can this proceeding go further at this point if they are in violation of a current restriction?
That's not for this board to decide.
Okay.
We're only deciding on this application.
Okay. Well, I'm just asking.
Yep.
Okay. So on the application, it says they are not going to affect adjoining properties. Well, I have agriculture. I stated in that meeting. I have livestock. I've got a packet here that cost me tens of thousands of dollars that, you know, says I can't have livestock now. You know, I mean, or I get sued. You know, does that not affect adjoining properties? You know, I watched a lot of this stuff tonight. I mean, I learned some stuff. A lot of the stuff that these developments are doing are to help the neighbors. You watched me in that video on July 15th, 2013. I asked about a culvert, you know, a ditch around the properties. You know, how are you going to protect me? Well, I got flooded. They didn't finish their stormwater management program. Mr. Weatherly came down, called me from their property. I don't know why you got flooded. Well, come over here. I'll show you. Come from right here. Here's the video. Here's the water coming. Oh, well, they didn't finish their stormwater. Well, where's the protection for me? You know, I mean, I see they're going to put in a privacy fence. I've been asking for a privacy fence since the 25-foot undisturbed buffer didn't work. You know, we've been to the Board of Adjustments. We went through all this process. Where is the protection for the small people? You know, how do you protect that? I'm not opposed to this. You know, if the county needs it, let's learn from the mistakes that we had. You know, I mean, the community came out. one of the things they gave up was access to West Mobile Road. Community didn't want it. Okay, hey, if that's what we got to do to get our rezoning, well, they accepted that. Well, then, if you weren't okay with not having access, why did you go forward with the project? I mean, does that not make sense? I mean, these 39 units were in the original plan. If that wasn't acceptable, why did we sign off on it? Why did we go forward? You know, why did you tell people you're okay with a rural environment beside your development, and then once you start, you make people get rid of their animals? Well, I mean, how does that work? You know, where is the protection going to be for the neighbors? You know, like I said, I'm not opposed to this, but there's right and wrong ways. If we can't learn from our mistakes and go back and protect the people, then what are we doing? You know, I mean, I've heard Mr. Norman's $15 million project. I'm not doubting they haven't done a nice job. Nobody's saying they haven't. But he said flat out he's not going to spend $20,000 on a fence to give privacy for my property. I mean, you and Mr. Hannig had that conversation. You know, I mean, let's be good neighbors. Good fences make good neighbors. I mean, I got one at my house in Grandy. It's been great. Nobody can see in. I can't see out. You know, I mean, there's so many, you know, like stormwater, the neighbors, the fence, you know, West Mobile Road. You know, why are we back on this stuff? Like I said, I am not going to stand here and say that the county doesn't need it. If you feel we need it, they've obviously got a waiting list. You know, apparently they've done a nice project. I don't want to fight with them. You know, I don't want to be the watchdog. You know, I don't need to be. You know, why am I up here still defending my rights as a property owner when they should have been protected in the first place? So if we can't learn from the mistakes, let's back up and fix the ones that were already made. You know, let's get you know, there's got to be a buffer between agriculture and condos. I told everybody in the beginning it wouldn't work. Oh no, it's okay. Well, apparently it wasn't okay. You know, how do we fix this? You know, I don't know legally how we fix it. I don't want to fight with these people. But if this continues, I mean, I get a basketball court that wasn't supposed to be where it was at. Now I've got a pole light that shines on my property all night long. You know, now I'm going to get how many more people playing basketball? It wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. It's not in the original stormwater management plan. First time I've been on that property since they put that in there was at this little community meeting. It was great because I actually got to see it not sloped in the right direction. So there's a little swell there, but it's half filled in. You know, what's going on? You know, why are we doing this? And if we're going to go forward with this, let's fix the problems that we've already learned from. You know, I've never been in violation on my property. I've been called out on stuff, state, county, nothing. I've got a timeline from the county of violations from University Park. I've never been in violation. Why am I paying the penalty? You know, and if we're going forward with this, let's fix some of this stuff. And more than willing to help, you know, talk to you, help you. Well, talk to, you know, house engineering. We can go forward, but we got to make sure that other property owners don't go through what you know, I can't afford to fight. That's why we have a farm to fork business. Really good. Can't do it. You know, somebody said they were okay with it. No, not so much. You know, how do you protect that? And I'm sorry if I get emotional, but this has affected my family. Mr. Debo says, I get pooped on. The only person that got pooped on is my family. You know, it's crap. It really is. So if you're going to go forward with this, let's back up. Let's make sure we get this stuff in there. And I'll help. You know, I'm here. I don't want to fight with them. But these properties have to coincide. You're going to give me this many more people. You know, let's work together. You know, it's as simple as that. It's all I'm asking. You know, let's learn from the mistakes. You know, we don't have to fight with attorneys, which, you know, I don't have the money. He does. You know, and that's where they get me. This is David and Goliath. You know,
I'd like to say that I'm sorry that you had these difficulties, and I can understand as a property owner how you would feel if your rights were impacted negatively. And I'm sorry that's happened, but it almost sounds like you're almost at the point of having to take legal action or continue to talk to the the officers in the planning and zoning department about violations. I mean, there's not much advice we can give you.
You can go, when we go forward talking about this project, I asked them, in that meeting, are you going to finish the stormwater stuff? Well, I can't answer that. Do you,
That appears to be.
Before you start building, we
That
got
might-
flooded because they didn't do that.
Yeah, that might be a code enforcement issue. If it was initially in the plan and it hasn't been executed, if it was supposed to be executed by a certain time, then perhaps
Like I
you
was
have
watching
that.
tonight. Did these people not doing developments? Were they not trying to look out for the neighbors? I mean, they were putting extra stuff in. Like you watch the video. I told the Board of Commissioners, I'll be back to tell you I told you so. This is what was going to happen, and it happened. So if we're going forward, I'm at a loss, I guess, if you're saying I'm SOL, but
I never said that though.
Yeah, but this is what
I'm just saying you're at a point, you're at a crossroads. Either you all communicate and work out your issues between yourselves, or what other choice do you have? It's unfortunate, but that's what it appears. What crossroads you're at right now? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer,
crossroads
and
where if this project is going forward,
Yeah.
you put in the restrictions, and just like West Mobile Road, if that was a kill for the deal in the first place, development should never went through. I mean, correct? Community stood up against it. The only person that stood up that night, when this got approved, was now Mrs. Debo. The community didn't want that. Now we're back at this. We got a new board in, so I guess we're going back to try to get it through now. I mean, how do you not learn from the mistakes?
I think that actually is a question you pose to the Board of Commissioners, being that they are the authority of what happens. We're just an advisory board, and we say, hey, we think blah, blah, blah should happen. But ultimately, they're the authority, and they're the ones that are responsible politically and ethically about what's happening to your situation.
Okay.
I mean, it's
We're up here
unfortunate
stating our
that
claims like we were
we
told
can't
to.
do anything about it.
Yeah. It's like my attorney told me to explain to the Board of Commissioners when this all went down in the first place, Tell them what
I
your
get you. I
concerns are.
understand. I'm sorry it's happened to you, but I wish you luck and hope you can correct it and work with the adjacent property owners.
Well, me too, but that don't get very far. Two
Keep
commissioners have
trying,
asked to
brother.
sit down.
Keep trying.
And, two commissioners have asked to sit down and try to work through this, and that got nowhere. So, pretty hard to deal with somebody who won't look, sit down with you at a table and try to work things out. They got
All I can tell
sickly
you is keep
attorneys
on
you.
trying. There's always a bright side to everything.
All right. Well, I won't take up any more time, but thank you. And
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. At this point, we'll go ahead and close the public portion. Do we have any comments or concerns?
And again, we're just hearing a change to the land use plan
That's it.
here. Right. Right. Just want to clarify.
Ms. Glaive, am I correct in saying that this is not modifying the existing plan that was approved by a prior Board of Commissioners?
Correct. That would take a whole new application to amend their plans, and it would require a public hearing and notifications.
So it'd be quite a expensive and lengthy process if something were to be changed that way. Likely.
I mean, it would take some time and some application fees and a little engineering and surveying.
Any other comments? We officially have 5 minutes left, so.
I have a question also, Ms. Glaive or Ms. LoCicero, in reference to the statements that the adjacent landowner made. What is happening right now to rectify that, just for informational purposes, if you know?
To rectify which
The
part?
concerns that the
concerns that he may
adjacent
have.
landowners stated.
Well, the stormwater has to be completed and approved by the state stormwater agency. It'll be inspected at the end of that phase of the project. They have one additional building to build. Basketball court location, they did submit an amended plan that was approved by the technical review committee for that relocation.
I think some of these basins are not there yet, and they will resolve the flooding issue.
There is an undisturbed buffer that had some disturbance after. Anyway, there were some trees that fell over in a storm. There were some trees that were cut down that may not have fallen over in the storm. They came back in with a supplemental landscaping plan that was approved by the county, and that was installed.
They've been in violation of the West Mobile Road access.
Hold on, folks. We're just here to hear this land use plan application.
I'm not aware of a complaint that was made, or I'm not aware of an active investigation for West Mobile Road connection. It's my understanding that connection can only be used to access that tower. Now, if it's being used to access more than that tower, then it would be in violation of their use permit.
But again, that's not within our purview right now. We're just looking. Okay, all right. Any other discussion? All right, I'll entertain a motion. Oh, sorry.
I was going to ask, so to continue, since there's definitely discourse between what's going on, a developer and stuff, and what I hear is there's some enforcement that's not being done or was never addressed, fencing.
It'd be like if you put in an application to build a garage in your backyard, but you didn't mow your lawn. So, are you allowed to go forward with the garage build if you haven't mowed your lawn in a month? You're in violation of some code, but it has nothing to do with you building your garage. They're two separate entities.
This new development, they can just.
Yeah. They're two separate issues. Yeah.
And this is changing the land use plan. This is an application to change the land use plan. They will have to come back and amend their master plan and their terms and conditions and their prior approval before they would be able to build. So this is the first step in the process, so that allow them the density. If the land use plan is not amended, they would not be allowed to add any more density to this project.
Right.
So we still have another several approvals and plans to be submitted.
But if there are violations or potential violations, we don't have any active cases right now for this property. That needs to be turned into the code enforcement officer for inspection and observation.
Yep. Any other comments or concerns? All right, now I'll entertain a motion.
Get the right number here. PB 1827.
Mm-hmm.
I'll motion to approve the PB 1827 adjustment of the land use plan. I can't say it's consistent with the land use plan because that's what we're adjusting. So
Yeah.
it's consistent with the use of the property.
Yeah. Have a motion, to have a second?
Second.
No second?
You can second for it.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Jane. Jane was a nay.
Oh, Jane is an A.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Had to go out on a no.
You're funny. All right, so motion passes.
You're killing me.
I don't think we have time for the next one, do we? Or
Well, I would suggest.
we're at 11. We're at our limit.
I know, but I would
go
one of the
ahead and do it.
one of the things that's changing in here is lowering the number of board members, and we're already having a problem getting a quorum.
Right.
So that this amendment to the board's rules of procedures lowers the number of board members needed for.
Okay, can we?
We can.
One.
Yeah, let's go speed it up. Let's go.
Yes. Most of these rules of procedure, I'll go through them very quickly. Just bring the planning board's rules and procedures into compliance with the county's code of ordinances, along with Robert's Rules of Procedure and the code of ethics that the commissioners must adhere to as well. So that's when we go through on page 208. That's the first, the general rules there. The powers and duties of the planning board, we've kind of done a little bit of a reorganizing of that. We moved that from much later on in the rules of procedure. We moved that up to number 2. We also made the change for, we don't refer to it as a zoning atlas anymore. It's the zoning map. And instead of this ordinance, it is now the Unified Development Ordinance.
I have a question before we move on to the next slide. I don't know if I'm alone on this, but the 7 to 6 would be an issue for me.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay. We'll get
Okay,
we'll get
sorry.
there. It is. I'm trying to.
Sorry, go.
Yeah. Appointment in terms of planning board members. The UDO was modified 2 years ago, Cherie, where it addressed that. Yes, we all know about that. So this brings the rules and procedure into alignment with that change in membership. Just a little, and B there, it changes, just a little tweaking of the language. And let's see, then in E, once again, just a little bit of change in language, getting our grammar correct, and instead of board of commissioners outside of Currituck County, if the planning board member moves, they have to be reappointed if they move out of the county. This is where we have a little bit of discussions, meetings of the planning board, the second Tuesday of the month, and at the historic courthouse, we modified it here for 6. That's worth the discussion for the board members.
I'd prefer to keep it at 7. It makes it easier for us. We have dinner with the family and then come down here.
The commissioners, would that match the commissioners?
Yeah.
What do they mean?
Yes, right now they meet at 6.
This is the only meeting in 4 years that has gone long. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had one that went up to 9:30 or
Normally
9:40,
isn't this
but
long.
yeah. So,
But we had an extreme volume tonight compared to
Yeah.
normal. And
Right.
part of that's because of postponement. And,
Correct.
And not having a meeting last month, that increased our agenda.
What's the adjustment as far as, you said a couple we've gone over before, where they're reducing it down to 7 people?
Correct.
And so what's the quorum needed at 7?
At 4, you
4
need 4.
instead of
You need
5,
still
yeah.
need a majority. Yeah, instead of 5, when you're at 9, you need 5.
Can these be adjusted anytime? If later on we wanted to change the time to 6, we
Anytime
can
you
do
want.
that?
You could. And
can.
you have to have essentially 2 readings of your rules of procedure. You can have them at one meeting, and you did see these months ago.
It's been a
When Carol
while.
was still,
Yeah.
Carol was still
Yeah.
the chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we saw these, and that's just why we're trying to. We never. I guess it just one of those things we didn't follow up on. Let's see. You see just a little bit of language change, a little bit of more explanation, a total time for the applicant in there, in the meetings of the planning board. So I guess it is a consensus to keep it at 7 from the board members.
wow, how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
I'm fine
Okay.
with 6 or 7.
So
fine.
I'd say stay at 7.
7.
So it would really
Not
be
midnight.
Shay and Anna,
Normally it's
because if
2 hours.
You're
yeah,
off.
y'all are off,
Off,
so I
yeah.
would defer
No,
to.
I mean, I'm off the board.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as are
right,
as are
Remember this.
Stephen and
we're there.
Fred.
Yeah,
Oh,
So I would defer to
Curtis, Shay, and Anna.
That's right, Fred, you're not going to be.
That's really.
Oh, he'll still be here.
I'll still be here.
Billy's
Unless
replaced.
my
Replacement.
commissioner for Moyoc replaces me.
We'll all still be around for a while.
Could y'all do 6
Do you
o'clock?
have a preference
I
at
don't.
all?
Wait,
I know you have a long drive.
just.
I'll defer to you, whatever you want.
I think 7 is more sensible. It's been that
Okay.
way for years.
7.
We hear
Like, I hear it
comments.
doesn't always go this late, so I'm okay.
No,
And when we have an agenda like this, we would have typically asked for 6 o'clock, but everything kind of came together.
Yeah.
Too much stuff going on. And last time we did that with the flood ordinance, there was a couple of applicants that
Didn't get the memo.
didn't get the memo.
Yeah.
Shay,
So-
just for reference, could you meet at 6?
I could.
And Anna, could you meet at 6?
Yes.
So I know we're just trying to align them to be consistent with the Board of Commissioners meeting too.
Well,
That's fine.
the difficulty in that is it's not just 6. With our meetings that we
It means
have to have
5.
beforehand, perhaps it might be 5. That means folks that do work, they've got to take
And I
off
would,
work early
again,
or
defer to the
whatever.
two that are going to be here.
So 6 is just the meeting time of the public. We still have a commitment likely to be there. early.
Generally, our work sessions are half an hour long.
Right.
Generally, it's not like tonight. I don't want to scare you.
Yeah, this is way abnormal.
Do y'all have a preference?
Of course they do.
Absolutely.
We would,
They're gonna say what the commissioners
They
say.
want to say what the commissioners say. 6 o'clock.
yeah, if you guys want to meet at
They
4 in the
wanna be-
afternoon,
they
we would
wanna
love
be here till
that.
midnight tonight. so-
Commissioners, the Board of Adjustment, every other board that we do is 6.
Yeah,
If it wasn't for staying for the quorum, I'd have
I'm staying.
Right.
Problem with us changing it to 6 to match?
Well, only in that, if you got to be here by 5 or 5:30, depending on the work session, that's going to be difficult.
For,
If we leave it at 7 and then we want to.
You can change
You
realize
can
it's
change
not
it at a
working
later
out, we
time.
can
Yeah,
change
you can modify it. Yeah.
who would it be difficult for?
The public is
But
what
y'all
they
aren't on the
said.
board anymore. Do you think it would
We
be
are until we
difficult?
get
We are
relieved.
They
until
are
we're
until they get
replaced.
reappointed. Or someone gets
Absolutely. Done, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Are you all finished presenting?
Just say yes.
Yes, let me just make sure there's nothing.
If you're finished presenting, I have some corrections, but they're mostly grammatical.
Okay.
If you all trust in my grammar, then I could actually tell you this in an email or over the phone.
Okay.
If that's okay with you all.
I think that
here,
would be acceptable.
just to prevent us from being long.
Yeah. Are any other questions, concerns?
I have one other issue. The on packet page 213, it still has Carol Bell as the chairman of the board when in fact it should be Fred Whiteman.
I'm offended.
It'll be changed. Yeah, like I said, this was
And also,
the first time you all heard this. Carol was the chairman.
Yeah.
are there any plans for any other meetings in the month of December for the planning board?
No.
Good.
When would the effective date of this document occur? On the date Fred signs it? So like whenever that is?
I have one prepared downstairs.
I mean, I can come down and sign it anytime. I don't need to be at a meeting.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is.
Call
if
me and
there
I'll
was
come
a
down and sign
potential
it.
For another meeting before the end of the year, that could affect what we have here as far as quorum and all that, as it is right now, because officially, Jane is going to be through December 31.
31st. Yeah.
Perhaps the effective date needs to be
December.
12:01 a.m. on 1/1/2019. That way we're saying, okay, past her effective date of her term, that's when this begins.
That's true. Yeah.
Effective date is January 1.
Sorry, guys.
I get it.
The UDO's already been changed. So she's
She's still an active member until December 31.
until the end of her term.
Mhm.
So and then she's going to
Then she goes
term
off.
out, bottom out, term off.
Sense to have an effective date in the future that way? Sure. Okay, Fred.
Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the proposed amendment to the Planning Board's Rules of Procedures. There are some minor spelling and grammatical errors that I'd be glad to go over with staff at a later time because of the hour it is. And like to add the effective date of 1/1/2019 at 12:01 a.m. as being the effective date of this document.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Do I have, a motion passes. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You do?
There's no
I'll second
announcements. All in favor? Adjourn.
Aye.